A white flash, then silence, then the scream of 30 voices at once. Ethan Reed opened his eyes and saw a sky with two moons. One was pale blue, the other had a reddish hue, like old copper. He was lying on something cold and smooth, marble, white marble veined with gold. It smelled of roses and, for some reason, gunpowder. All around him on the floor lay bodies in school uniforms. 30 girls. Some were moaning. Some were already sitting up and looking around. One was throwing up in a corner. The bus was on its side behind them. Half the roof was crushed. The windshield was gone. White smoke was billowing from the engine, but there was no fire. Ethan sat down and touched his head. Blood. A shallow cut above his left ear. His headphones were dangling around his neck. One earbud was cracked in half. He looked at his hands. The same hands. The same calluses from pencils. The same scar on the knuckle of his middle finger from a kitchen knife in 6th grade. His body hadn't changed. But a blue, translucent panel hung before his eyes. Letters formed words in English. Name: Ethan Reed. Class: Roy's coordinator. Unique. Strength: 3. Magic: 1. Speed: 5. Stamina: 4. Damage: blocked. He blinked. The panel didn't disappear. He blinked again. The panel remained. A metallic voice in his head spoke a single phrase. Roy coordinator class activated. Group trust: 4 out of 3,100. Ethan looked to his right. Madison Pack was standing. Of course she was the first to get up. Of course she had already straightened her back and smoothed her hair. Hanging above her head was the same blue panel. Class: Ice Queen. Rank: SS. Strength: 74. Magic: 112. Ethan looked at his own strength rating of 3 and smirked to himself. During debates, he always sat across from whoever looked the most confident, and he'd pick apart their every sentence. It seemed to be the same principle here, only instead of a jury, there were dragons. Madison turned around. Her eyes found his panel. She read the numbers and laughed. Loudly. Loud enough for the whole hall to hear. She said that Reed was a debuff and that he was really just dead weight. 5 heads turned toward her, then toward him, then back to her. Ethan didn't respond. He was counting. 30 bodies on the floor, 1 standing. His, plus Madison. 32 minus the driver. There was no driver. 31 souls. He began to go around the ones lying down. First, breathing. Second, breathing. A cut on her forehead. Third, Ari Chong. Small, quiet. She'd sat behind him in English class for 3 years. She was lying on her side. Her eyes were open. A panel glowed above her. Rodnick, alive. Rank S, healer. Her lips were moving, but no sound came out. Ethan crouched down beside her. He asked if she could hear him. She nodded. Her hands were trembling. He moved on. The 4th, the 5th, the 6th. Each had a panel. Each had a class. Mage, marksman, tank, oracle. Each number was higher than his. Every single one. He reached the 29th, Brielle Walker. She was sitting in the corner of the hall, her hood pulled down over her eyes, her arms wrapped around her knees. She was rocking back and forth. Above her it was burning. The voice of the abyss. A unique class. Ethan didn't approach her. Not now. He finished his rounds and stood in the middle of the hall. 31 girls. 1 guy. All alive. All in a foreign world under a sky with 2 moons. And he had 3 powers. He raised his hand, not to strike, but to get their attention. His voice was steady. He asked everyone who could sit down to do so now. He said he would now take a head count and check for injuries. He said no one had died and that they would figure things out. 17 pairs of eyes looked at him. The rest were still coming too. Madison snorted and turned away, but she sat down. Sophie Hahn raised her hand from behind an overturned bus seat. She said all her bones were intact, but it seemed she could see the future, and that the future sucked. Then she added, "Cap." No irony, just cap. The doors at the far end of the hall swung open. The light from the torches blinded them. People in armor entered. Behind them was a woman, tall, thin, a crown on her dark hair, a blue velvet gown with silver embroidery. Her face was beautiful but haggard, dark circles under her eyes, like someone who hadn't slept in a week. Queen Regent Valeria. Ethan didn't know her name, but he knew that look on her face. His mother used to look like that when she was going over the accounts at the end of the month, despair masked by her bearing. Standing next to the queen was a man in a black robe, the court mage. He held a scroll in his hands, and his hands were trembling too. He quickly walked past the girls, stopping at each one. He looked at the panel, nodded, and reached Ethan. He stopped, read it. He read it again. He turned pale. He turned to the queen and whispered that it was a mistake by the key, that it needed to be removed before the maidens scattered. Ethan heard every word. The hall was silent, and the mage's whisper was loud. 30 pairs of eyes were now staring at him. He saw the numbers above each head. Not just stats, readiness. Everyone's was below 20 out of 100. Trust in the leader. Most had 0. Ari had 2. Sophie had 1. Madison had -15. Minus. He didn't even know such a thing as a negative number existed. The queen approached him. She looked down at him from above. She was a head taller than him, or maybe he hadn't yet reached his full height. She said that the summoning key was designed for 5 warriors, that 31 souls were a disaster, not a blessing, that she didn't have the resources to feed so many mouths, that she would divide the group among the noble houses. Each house would receive 3 or 4 summoned. She would train them, arm them, send them to the rift. Ethan listened. He did the math, and when she finished, he spoke. Not loudly, not defiantly, calmly. Like in a debate when the stakes are high and the judges are weary. He said, "Your Majesty, 30 chosen. Your budget is for 5. Divide us and you'll lose 25 out of 30 within a month. Hunger, panic, desertions, language barriers, culture shock." He listed the factors, counting them off on his fingers. The queen watched his fingers. Moore stood behind her shoulder, his face darkening with every word. Ethan continued, "Keep us as a single group, under my command. 5 combat-ready units in a week, 15 in a month. Condition, complete autonomy over food and housing." The queen was silent. 5 seconds. 10. Moore leaned toward her ear. She raised her hand and Moore fell silent mid-sentence. She asked why she should trust a boy with a strength of 3. Ethan replied, "Because each of these girls is ranked from A to SS, and not a single one of them is currently able to stand without help. You don't need a sword. You need someone who can make 30 swords work as one." Silence. Then the queen nodded, one short nod. Behind her, Moore clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white. For the first time that evening, Madison closed her mouth. Above Ethan's head, a blue notification flashed. +3 trust from 12 group members. The recognition lottery has been unlocked. He didn't smile. 12 out of 30. That's less than half. The remaining 18 looked at him with doubt, indifference, or fear. He needed all 30. Every single one. Every single one. Because the system wasn't messing around. If the group fell below 5 members, his class would be deactivated. And then death in 72 hours. He stood in a stranger's throne room beneath 2 moons. A 17-year-old guy from Portland. 3 strength, 0 damage, 31 lives resting on his shoulders, and a timer in his peripheral vision that he'd only just noticed. The court's selection. 30 days. They'd been given a wing of the castle, the east wing, the one farthest from the throne room. 20 rooms for 31 girls and 1 guy. walls of gray stone, narrow windows overlooking a forest that shouldn't be there. The furniture was old but sturdy. On every door was a sign in a language no one understood, but the system translated it automatically. Barracks A, Barracks B, officers' quarters, storage room, kitchen. Ethan stood in the hallway and assigned the rooms, 2 people per room. He knew who was friends with whom. 3 years at the same school, 3 years as an assistant coach for the women's volleyball team. He knew that Rachel and Hannah hadn't spoken since the Halloween party, that Mina was terrified of the dark and needed a roommate who wouldn't laugh, that Jia Kim was a light sleeper and woke at the slightest rustle. He assigned everyone their rooms in 20 minutes. He took the officer's room for himself, not out of pride. It was closest to the stairs. If anything happened at night, he'd be the first one on the scene. Madison walked into her room and closed the door without saying a word. Her friends Lena and Taylor stood by the door like guards. 5 out of 30 were already on her side. Ethan saw the numbers. Lena's trust in him, 0. Taylor, 0. Christy, 1. Naomi, 0. Hyun-jin, -2. He memorized every number. In debates, he always started with the toughest opponent. But here, he would start with those who were undecided. The middle ground. Neither the top nor the bottom. Those with trust levels between 1 and 5. There were 14 of them. Ari appeared next to a basin of warm water and some rags. She had already tended to all the wounded. She had bandaged 7 of them. Her hands were covered in someone else's blood up to her elbows. Above her head, the light was on. Readiness, 61. Trust in the leader, 35. She was the only one above 30. She looked at the cut above his ear and said he needed a bandage too. He said later. She didn't leave. She stood there and waited. He realized she wasn't going to leave. He sat down on the step. She washed the wound. Her fingers were small and icy. She said the cut wasn't deep, that it would heal in a couple of days. Her voice was so soft that Ethan leaned in to hear her. She smelled of rubbing alcohol. Where did she get the alcohol? He asked. She replied that she'd found it in the bus's first aid kit. First aid, the standard kit. She took him away before anyone even remembered he existed. Ethan looked at her. 3 years behind him in English class. He never once turned around. Not once. She finished bandaging him and moved on to the next injured person. He watched her go and thought that the first person to care for him in this world was the one he hadn't noticed for 3 years. Night fell like an axe, no twilight. A minute ago it had been gray, then it turned black. 2 moons rose at the same time. Blue and red light mingled on the corridor walls. Ethan activated tactical scan. 30 dots within a 200-foot radius. Each dot was a person. Each had a pulse and a stress level. 23 out of 30 were in a state of alarm. 7 were asleep. Ari wasn't asleep. She was sitting in Barracks B, going through her gear. Sophie wasn't asleep. She was standing by the window, looking at the 2 moons. Bree wasn't asleep. She was sitting in the corner of her room in the same position. Hood up, knees to her chest, rocking back and forth. Her stress level was 94 out of 100. Ethan made a mental note. Bree was the first one who needed help. But not today. Today he had no right. He had a trust score of 8 from her. Any intervention at that level would be perceived as an intrusion. He knew that. 3 years in a women's group had taught him one rule. Don't get involved until you're asked. He walked down the hallway. He checked the doors. The locks were old but worked. The windows were narrow. An adult couldn't squeeze through. A child could squeeze through. A creature could squeeze through. He didn't know how big the creatures here were. He went down to the first floor. The exit to the courtyard. A wooden door. An iron bolt. He slid it shut. He went out through the side door. The courtyard was empty. Torches burned along the perimeter. Beyond the castle wall, the forest began. Dark. Dense. Not a sound came from the forest. That was worse than if sounds had been coming from it. Ethan went back inside. He went up to the second floor. He sat down on the bed in the officers' quarters. It was hard. The mattress was stuffed with straw. The blanket was made of coarse fabric. He lay down and closed his eyes. Sleep wouldn't come. Numbers danced before his eyes. 3 strength, 30 days, 3,100 trust, 4 earned. He did the math. If he earned 100 trust every day, he'd have 3,000 in 30 days. Not enough. He needed to earn 104 a day, every day. No days off. No slip-ups. With a group in which 6 people actively hated him and 14 were skeptical. He rolled onto his side. Something scraped against the wall from the outside. A quiet sound, like nails on stone. He froze. The sound repeated. Closer. Ethan stood up. He walked over to the window. Through a crack between the stones, he could see the castle wall. Something was moving along it. Long, dark, with 4 limbs that bent the wrong way. A head without eyes. A mouth stretching from ear to ear. The creature was crawling up the vertical wall, toward the second-floor windows, toward Barracks B, where 8 girls were sleeping. Ethan didn't scream. His body wanted to scream. His throat tightened, but his brain was working faster. He activated tactical scan. The creature wasn't within a 200-foot radius. He could see it with his own eyes, but the system couldn't. So it was out of range. So it was farther away than it seemed. Or maybe the system didn't count creatures. He ran down the hallway, quietly, barefoot on the stone. The cold stung his feet. Barracks B. He pushed open the door. 8 girls were asleep. The window was closed. He walked over to the window. He looked down. The creature was already at ground level, 2 meters directly below him. He could see its muscles moving beneath its black skin. He could see the saliva on its teeth. Jia Kim was sleeping against the far wall. Her stats glowed in the darkness. Stone wall, S rank, strength 89, readiness 34. He rushed over to her. He shook her by the shoulder. She woke up instantly, just as he'd expected, a light sleeper. He pressed a finger to his lips. He pointed at the window. She looked. Her eyes widened. The creature was already at the level of the windowsill. Its fingers were clinging to the stone. Its eyeless head turned toward them. Its mouth opened wide. A sound, a low rumble that made her teeth ache. Jia stood up. Her hands were covered in a gray film. Stone. Her skin was turning to stone from her fingertips to her elbows. She said she wouldn't have time, that she didn't know how this worked, that she'd never really fought before. Ethan looked at her stats. Readiness, 34. Too low for combat. But trust in him, 25. Above the 20 threshold, he could issue a command, a 15-second bonus, plus 30% to all stats. 1 chance. The creature squeezed through the window. Its body was as supple as a snake. It fell to the floor of the barracks. 2 girls woke up and screamed. Ethan opened his mouth and gave the first order of his life. Jia, wall, now. 3 words. The system worked. A blue flash enveloped Jia. Her stats skyrocketed. Strength from 89 to 116. Speed from 45 to 59. Readiness from 34 to 44. She stepped forward. The creature lunged at her. Its maw opened to the width of a human torso. Jia struck with her fist. A straight punch. No wind-up. Just like on a wrestling mat. Her fist, hard as stone, entered the creature's maw and emerged on the other side. 780 damage. The numbers flashed and faded. The creature flew back into the wall. The wall cracked. The creature fell. It didn't move. Jia stood in the middle of the room. Her stone fist was covered in black slime. She was breathing heavily. The 7 girls looked at her, then at Ethan, then at the dead creature. The silence lasted 5 seconds. Jia turned to him. Her lips trembled. She said one word. Thank you. A notification flashed above Ethan's head. Plus 15 trust from Jia. The recognition lottery has been activated. Prize: field ration recipe. He didn't smile. 7 girls in nightgowns stood around the dead monster. 1 was crying. 2 were holding hands. Ari ran into the room with a basin and bandages. She saw the creature. She turned pale. She pressed her bloodied palm to her mouth. Ethan didn't notice that she'd bitten her lip until it bled. He was staring at the creature, thinking, if one got in, that meant others could too. The windows, all the windows on the second floor, 20 rooms. He turned to the others who had woken up and told them everyone was to gather in the hallway. Now, every single one, no exceptions. They didn't sleep until dawn. 31 girls sat in the second floor hallway, backs against the wall, knees to their chests. Some were dozing, some were whispering. Madison sat in the center of her group of 5. Lena, Taylor, Christy, Naomi, Hyunjin. They whispered and glanced at Ethan. He was sitting by the door to the officers' quarters. He wasn't sleeping. He was checking the tactical overview every 10 minutes. The creatures were gone, but the group's readiness score had dropped to an average of 12. Fear, panic, exhaustion, hunger. When the sky began to lighten, he stood up. He looked at the system clock. 6 a.m. local time. It was getting light earlier than in Portland. He pulled the field ration recipe from his inventory. The system displayed it in his mind. Flour, water, salt, dried meat, herbs, proportions, cooking time, calorie content. 900 calories per serving. 1 serving per day sustains a soldier during light activity. He went down to the kitchen. The kitchen was enormous. Stone ovens, copper cauldrons, shelves stocked with supplies. Flour sat in sacks against the wall. He counted 12 sacks. That would last 2 weeks if he only prepared rations. He began kneading the dough. His hands remembered. His mother had taught him to cook since he was 10. A retired military logistics officer. She used to say that a man who couldn't feed himself was useless in the field. He kneaded the dough and thought. 31 portions, 12 sacks of flour, 14 days. Then he'd need a new source, hunting, or trading, or a request to the queen. But a request to the queen means dependence. And dependence means a loss of autonomy, which he had just secured yesterday. So, hunting it is. But hunting requires combat-ready people, and his team's readiness level is 12. A vicious cycle, he thought. He was kneading the dough, adding salt. Olivia Santoro walked into the kitchen. 16 years old, short hair, hands calloused from using a wrench. She looked around. She walked over to the stove. She tapped it with the knuckle of her finger. She said the design was primitive but functional. Good draft. The stone retains heat. Then she looked at his dough and said he was kneading it too hard. He'd overwork the gluten, and the bread would be as tough as a shoe sole. He looked at her. Above her head, a light was glowing. Blacksmith Artifactor, Rank B, Trust in Leader 18. He asked how she knew about gluten. She replied that her father was an auto mechanic and an amateur baker. Those were the only 2 skills he'd passed on to her, fixing things and baking. They worked together for 40 minutes, in silence. He kneaded. She shaped the dough. He watched the fire. She checked the temperature with her hand over the stone. 31 flatbreads lay on the stone table when the first girls began to come down. The smell of fresh bread in the stone castle. It was the first familiar sensation in the last 12 hours. Ari was the third to arrive. She looked at the flatbreads, then at Ethan. He noticed she hadn't taken the one with meat. She didn't eat meat. She'd been behind him for 3 years in English class and he hadn't known. Or maybe he knew subconsciously, because the recipe included a meatless option. He held out the herb flatbread to her. She took it. Their fingers touched. She looked away. Sophie came in last. Her eyes were red. She hadn't slept. She sat down next to Ethan and said she'd seen something. He asked what. She said her chronovision class gave her visions, brief ones, like flashes. She'd seen today, the forest, A group of girls walking to get water. An attack. 2 were injured. Ethan froze with the flatbread in his hand. He asked when. She said she didn't know. The visions don't give a time, just images. He asked who was leading the group in the forest. Sophie paused. Then she said, Madison. He put down the flatbread. He looked across the room at Madison. She was eating standing up, surrounded by her 5 companions. She was planning something. He could tell by her body language, the tilt of her head, the quick glances around, the whispering. After breakfast, Madison approached him. She didn't actually approach him. She stopped 3 meters away and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. She said that yesterday he'd been given the right to command, but he had nothing to command, that the group was demoralized, that they needed water from the stream, that she would take 10 volunteers and go herself, because a leader has to act, not stand there holding a test. 20 heads turned toward him. He saw the numbers. 12 people with a trust score below 5. They were waiting for his reaction. If he forbade Madison from going, he'd look like a coward. If he let her go and the group returned with water, Madison would become a hero. If he let her go and the group got into trouble, Madison would blame him for not going with them. 3 options. All bad. He chose the 4th. He said, "Take 20." "Not 10." Madison blinked. He continued, 10 fighters, 10 support, Gia in the vanguard, Ari in the rear for medical support, Sophie by your side for navigation. He laid out the positions in 30 seconds, like a coach before a game. Madison looked at him. There was something new in her eyes. Not respect. Not respect yet. Surprise. She'd expected him to argue. He didn't. He gave her what she wanted, but on his terms. She nodded and went to round up the team. Sophie approached him from behind and asked quietly, "You know what's going to happen?" He replied, "Yes." She asked why he was letting them go. He replied that Madison needed to lose on her own, not because he told her to, but because she decided to. Sophie looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "You're a scary person, Cap." 20 people went into the woods. Ethan stayed in the castle with 11. He stood by the window and watched. The tactical scanner didn't reach the woods. Its radius was 200 feet. The woods began at 400. He was blind. He waited. 40 minutes. An hour and a half. He counted the seconds. At the 50-minute mark, Bree approached him. She stood behind him. He saw her reflection in the glass, hood up, eyes downcast. She asked quietly, "They'll come back." No question. A statement that wanted to be a question. He replied, "Yes." She paused and walked away. Her trust rose from 8 to 9. 1 point. For a single word. An hour and 40 minutes later, the group returned. He heard them before he saw them. Shouts, pounding footsteps. The door burst open. Madison stood in the doorway. Her face was pale, blood on her sleeve. Not hers. 2 girls were slung over Gia's shoulders. One was unconscious. The other had a laceration on her thigh. Ari was already running toward them with bandages. Madison looked at Ethan. He saw her stats. Readiness 18. Trust in leader -15. No. -8. It went up. From -15 to -8 in a single trip. Because he turned out to be right. She said so. 3 creatures by the stream. More than the one from last night. Fast. If Gia hadn't been with us, she didn't finish. She turned around and went back to her room. 5 of her friends followed her. But Christy stopped in the doorway. She turned to Ethan and said, "Thanks for sending Gia." Then she left. +8 trust from 19 group members. The system flashed. Total trust, 87 out of 3,100. He stood in the hallway. 87 out of 3,100. Day 3 of 30. Another 3,013 points. Another 27 days. He went to the kitchen to knead dough for dinner. Ethan prepared a field ration for the entire group, 31 servings, using a recipe from the lottery. Sophie warned him about a vision of an attack in the forest. Madison demanded to lead the group to find water, and Ethan let her go, but on his own terms. positioning Gia and Ari in their places. The group was ambushed by 3 creatures but survived thanks to Gia. Madison's trust rose from -15 to -8. The group's total trust rose to 87 out of 3,100. Day 4 began with rain. Not ordinary rain. The raindrops were warm and smelled of iron. Sophie said there were 3 kinds of rain in this world. Gray is normal. Red is acid. Warm and smelling of iron is safe but disgusting. She knew because she'd seen it. Her class fed her information in bits and pieces, like a broken TV, a flash, an image, darkness. Ethan stood in the kitchen, looking at the red moon through the window. It was brighter than yesterday, or so it seemed to him. He checked their supplies. 10 sacks of flour, 2 used up in 2 days. The rate was too high. If they ate only rations, the flour would run out in 10 days. They needed meat. They needed vegetables. They needed a source that didn't depend on the castle's supplies. He stepped out into the courtyard. Rain pelted his face. Warm. Strange. Beyond the castle walls lay a forest. Beyond the forest, according to the court mage, was the village of Cresswood. A 2-hour walk. A population of about 300. A market. Small-scale trade. Food could be found there. But that would require money. Or goods to trade. Or a service. He returned to the castle. He found Olivia in the storage room. She was sorting through the wreckage of the bus. The engine. The transmission. The steering column. She was laying out the parts on the floor with the same tenderness with which other people lay out photographs. He asked if she could make anything useful out of the bus's metal. She looked at him as if he were an idiot, then at the parts, then back at him. She said the bus was 17 metric tons of steel and aluminum, that in a world where blacksmiths work with ore and a hammer, what she held in her hands was a fortune. She could forge knives, arrowheads, tools, pots, anything needed. Her blacksmith artifactor class gives her a bonus to crafting, plus 40% to quality, plus 20% to speed. But she needs a forge, a furnace, an anvil, a hammer. Ethan nodded. He turned and walked toward the Queen. He'd been waiting in the reception room for 2 hours. Moore had been arrested, but his men were still working at court. A sour-faced secretary was making him wait. Ethan waited. He knew how to wait. During trials, the judge would sometimes delay the verdict by half an hour. You sit there and don't flinch. If you show your nerves, you lose. The Queen received him in a small office. She looked worse than she had 2 days ago. The dark circles under her eyes had turned black. She asked what he wanted. He said, a forge, a furnace, an anvil, a hammer, and permission to trade in Cresswood. She asked what he planned to trade. He replied, steel. We have 17 metric tons of metal from another world. Your blacksmiths have never seen an alloy like this. She remained silent. He continued, a single knife made from our steel will be worth as much as 10 local ones. This isn't a drain on your treasury, it's revenue. 20% of every transaction goes to the crown. She raised an eyebrow. She asked, why 20 rather than 50? He replied that at 50%, it would be more profitable for him to trade without a license, and that he preferred an honest deal. She almost smiled. Almost. She nodded. She signed the paper. He was given a smithy in the basement of the East Wing, an old, abandoned one, but with a working forge and a black stone anvil. Olivia walked into the smithy and fell silent for a moment. Then she said the anvil was made of obsidian, that such a thing didn't exist in their world, and that she had fallen in love. Then she blushed and said she'd fallen in love with the anvil, not with him. Ethan didn't comment. She worked all day. The clang of metal from the basement echoed through the wing. By evening she had brought out 12 knives, blades made of bus steel. The handles were wrapped in leather straps from the seats. Each knife was a work of art. Smooth, light, so sharp that Ethan cut himself just by glancing at the blade. The system displayed the stats. Otherworldly steel knife. Quality, excellent. Damage, 45. Bonus, plus 10 to cutting organic materials. A local knife dealt a maximum of 15 damage. Olivia stood nearby, looking at her hands. They were covered in burns and soot. She smiled. For the first time in 4 days. Her trust in the leader had risen from 18 to 24. Not because he'd ordered it, because he'd seen what she needed and given it to her. Materials, space, a purpose. The next morning, Ethan took 6 knives and Gia for protection. They headed to Crestwood, a 2-hour walk through the forest. Gia walked ahead silently. Her stone fists were at the ready. The forest was strange. Trees as tall as a 9-story building. Leaves blue instead of green. Underfoot, moss that glowed with a dim green light. The birds were silent. Crestwood turned out to be a village built of gray stone. 300 houses, a market in the central square. People in plain clothes, leather, wool, and linen. They looked at Ethan and Gia with fear. The chosen ones. The rumors had already spread. Ethan approached the blacksmith shop, an old man with hands like oak roots. He showed him a knife. The old man took it, turned it over in his hands, tested the blade on his fingernail. The nail sliced off like butter. The old man looked at Ethan. His eyes changed. They became greedy. He asked how much. Ethan named his price, 15 silver coins for the knife. The old man said it was a rip-off. Ethan replied that a local knife cost 3 silver coins and cut 3 times as poorly, that his knife would last twice as long, that the blacksmith could resell it for 25. The old man haggled for 20 minutes. They settled on 12. 6 knives, 72 silver coins. Ethan bought flour, dried meat, vegetables, salt, cloth, thread, soap. It all cost 40 silver coins. 32 remained. He tucked them into his pocket, a reserve. On the way back, Gia was silent. Then she said one sentence. "You haggle just like my grandmother." Ethan didn't know her grandmother, but judging by her tone, it was a compliment. That evening, he laid out the supplies in the kitchen. Flour, meat, vegetables, fabric, soap. The girls gathered around. The soap sparked more excitement than the food. 4 days without a shower in a stone castle. Mina said Ethan was her hero. Rachel said the soap smelled like lavender and that she was about to cry. Ari took a piece of fabric and said she'd sew up some bandages, real ones, not from scraps of school uniforms. Sophie walked up to Ethan and whispered, 20 silver for the soap, and you've raised your trust by 40 points. The best investment on the continent. The system flashed. Plus 42 trust points from 22 group members. Total, 129 out of 3,100. Day 5. 25 days left. He sat down on a step and counted. 129. The growth will slow down. The first few days are always the easiest. It's easy to earn gratitude when people are hungry and scared. It's harder when basic needs are met and conflicts begin. And conflicts will begin. Because 31 girls in a confined space isn't an army. It's pressure. He knew that. 3 years playing volleyball, a week of training camp, 9 girls in one room. By the 3rd day, someone's sobbing. By the 5th, 2 aren't speaking to each other. By the 7th, the captain's yelling at everyone. There are 31 here, not 9, and not a week. 30 days. He closed his eyes, a list in his head. Problems. First, food is sorted for 2 weeks. Second, safety. Those creatures come out at night. We need a watch system. Third, training. 27 girls don't know their classes. They don't know how to fight. They don't know how to use their abilities. Fourth, Madison. She's gone quiet since the forest, but she hasn't given up. She's waiting for him to make a mistake. Fifth, Moore has been arrested, but his men are still at large. A messenger with poison in a bottle of wine. Someone in the castle wants them dead. Sixth, Bree. Stress level 94. She isn't eating. She isn't sleeping. She isn't talking. If he loses her, the group's morale will drop by 30. If it drops below 5, he'll die. Every person counts. He opened his eyes. 2 moons hung over the castle courtyard. The red one was brighter, definitely brighter than yesterday. He didn't know what that meant, but he knew it meant something. Ethan organized a trade network. Olivia forged 12 knives from bus steel. Ethan bargained with the queen for a smithy and trading rights, giving 20% of the profits to the crown. In the village of Crestwood, he sold 6 knives for 72 silver coins and bought supplies, including soap, which raised trust by 2 points. Total trust reached 129 out of 3,100 on the 5th day. The red moon is growing brighter. Day 7. Ethan knew this day would be bad. He could feel it in the numbers. The group's readiness held steady at 28, seemingly an improvement, but trust in the leader had fractured. The core: Ari 42, Gia 40, Sophie 28, Olivia 24, Bree 11. These 5 followed him without question. The middle: 14 people with trust scores ranging from 6 to 15. They complied with requests but not orders. They were waiting. The bottom: 6 people. Madison. She was at -8. Lena was at 0. Taylor was at 0. Christy was at 1. Naomi was at 0. Hyun-jin was at -2. And 5 more outside Madison's group with trust scores ranging from 2 to 4. 11 people who could swing her way at any moment. Madison came to breakfast with a plan. She didn't call it a plan. She called it a vote. She stood in the middle of the kitchen and said enough was enough. That a week had passed. That Reed feeds them bread and takes them on walks but doesn't train them. That creatures come out at night and they sit in the hallway like sheep. That they need a leader who will lead them into battle, not to the market for soap. She said she was proposing a vote. Who's for Reed? Who's for her? Democracy. 31 votes, a simple majority. 20 heads turned toward her, then toward Ethan. He was standing by the stove with a spatula in his hand, dough on his palms, a burlap apron. He looked like a cook, not a commander. Madison looked like a queen. Back straight, eyes cold. SS class, 112 magic, ice on his fingertips. He looked at the numbers, quickly, in his head. Ari is voting for him. Gia is voting for him. Sophie is voting for him. Olivia is voting for him. Bree, not sure, undecided. 14 people, maybe 5 or 6 for him. The rest are for Madison or will abstain. Madison's group, 6 votes for her guaranteed. 5 swing votes, more likely for her than for him. He'd done the math. 12 for him. 19 for her or abstentions. He'd lose. He knew he'd lose even before she opened her mouth. He could have argued, could have listed what he'd done that week: food, trade, the blacksmith shop, night watch, could have reminded them about the creature in the barracks and the ambush in the woods. But that would have been an excuse. And an excuse in a debate is an admission of weakness. He took off his apron, set down the spatula, wiped his hands, said, "All right, let's vote." Madison blinked. She had expected resistance. He didn't give it to her. The vote took 3 minutes. Each person raised a hand for one of the 2. The result? 12 for Ethan, 19 for Madison. He lost. The system didn't react. The coordinator's position didn't depend on the vote. It depended on trust. And trust wasn't measured by raised hands. Ethan nodded. He looked at Madison and said 4 words. "All right, Madison, lead us." She stood up straight. She had won. She knew it. Everyone knew it. She said the group's first stop would be the stream. A full water run. 20 people. She herself at the head. Ethan asked if she'd take Gia. Madison said she could handle it without his advice. He didn't press the issue. They left. 20 people. Without Gia. Without Ari in the rear. No defensive positions. Madison in front. Lena and Taylor on either side. The rest in a cluster. Ethan stood by the window and watched. Sophie stood next to him. She was silent. Then she said the vision had returned. The same images. The forest. An attack. But worse. More creatures. He asked how many. She said she hadn't counted. A lot. Gia stood by the door, arms crossed. Stony skin crept up her forearms. She said one word. Go. Not a question, a statement. Ethan shook his head. He said no. Gia looked at him. He could see her stats. Readiness, 52. Trust, 40. She was ready to run into the woods right now. He said that if he sent Gia after Madison, Madison would take it as interference, as a lack of trust. And the trust that Madison had built up over the week, from -15 to -8, would plummet again. They had to wait. Gia clenched her fists. The stone on her hands cracked. She said that if anyone died, Ethan replied, no one will die. Sophie sees the wounded, not the dead. He hoped that was true. 40 minutes. Silence. Ethan counted the seconds. At the 28th minute, he heard a scream. Distant, beyond tactical range, but human. He didn't run. Not because he didn't want to, because if he ran, it would mean he hadn't believed in Madison from the very beginning. And she had to make her own way back. Broken, but on her own. An hour and 12 minutes later, the door burst open. Madison stood in the doorway. Mud, blood, a torn sleeve, ice on her hands. She'd used her ability, for the first time. Behind her, Taylor was carrying Naomi on her back. A laceration on her shoulder. The bone was visible. Hannah was limping. 3 creatures had attacked by the stream. Madison killed one, froze it, smashed it. But the other 2 attacked from the flanks, because no one was covering the flanks, because there were no positions, because Madison didn't know what flanks were. She was a fighter, not a tactician. Ari rushed to the wounded. Her hands glowed green, healing energy. The wound on Naomi's shoulder began to close, slowly. Ari turned pale. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Ethan looked at her stats. HP 340 out of 400. It dropped by 60 in a single healing. She was paying with her own health. He took note. Madison stood in the middle of the hallway. 19 pairs of eyes were watching her. She had brought them back, but 2 were wounded. She'd won the vote and lost the mission. She stood there, her shoulders trembling. Ethan walked over to her, not to reproach her, not to offer advice. He handed her a mug of water. She looked at the mug, then at him. She took it, drank it. Her hand was shaking. She said, "Give me back command." 2 words, quietly, just to him. He nodded, turned to the group, said that from now on, training would start tomorrow at dawn, that each of them would know her place in formation, that each of them would know who was on her left and who was on her right, that no one would ever go into the woods in a group again. 26 heads nodded. 5 did not. Lena, Taylor, Hyunjin, and 2 others. But they didn't argue. The system flashed. Plus 8 trust points from 19 group members. Madison. -8 became -3. An increase. Small, but an increase. She didn't become the leader, but she was no longer an enemy. For now. That night, he didn't sleep again. Patrol, tactical survey, 30 checkpoints, everyone in place. Ari hadn't slept. She was sitting in Barracks B, re-bandaging her hands. Ethan approached the door. He didn't go in. He saw through the crack. Her hands were scratched, not from combat, from work. Bandages, fabric, needles. She was sewing bandages from the fabric he'd bought in Crestwood. She sewed all night, every night. He stood and watched. Then he quietly left. Her trust was 42, the highest in the group. She was his anchor, his first ally, the person who had been standing behind him for 3 years and whom he hadn't seen. Now he saw her. Under 2 moons in a foreign world, he finally saw. He returned to his quarters, lay down, closed his eyes. The system displayed the day's summary. Group trust, 137 out of 3,100. The recognition lottery, 2 words of gratitude for the day. Prize, a tactical map of the castle. He opened the map. Basements, 3 levels. The first level is occupied by Olivia's forge. The second is empty. The third is locked. The castle is marked. Requires the keeper's key. He closed the map, memorized it. The third basement, locked. Someone hid something there, or someone is hiding there. He lay there and thought. 137 out of 3,100. 7 days have passed. 23 remain. Recruitment rate, 19 points per day on average. At this rate, he'll gain 437 in 23 days. That makes 574 total. He needs 3,100. Not enough. Catastrophically insufficient. He needs a breakthrough. He needs an event that will raise trust not by 8 but by 80, or by 200. Something big, something that will make each of the 30 look at him and think, he knows what he's doing. He didn't know what it would be, but he knew it would come. Because 6 days, on the 10th and 14th days, the system's checkpoints are scheduled. The first group hunt, and he has to be ready. All of them have to be ready. 31 cards for one player. He didn't yet know that this phrase would become their motto, but he was already thinking it. On the 7th day, Madison called for a vote for leader and won 19-12. Ethan accepted defeat and let her lead the group to the stream without tactical support. The group was ambushed. Naomi was wounded in the shoulder. Madison killed one creature but lost control of the formation. Upon returning, she asked Ethan to take command again. Madison's trust rose to -3. Total trust, 137 out of 3,100. The lottery awarded a castle tactical card with a blocked third basement. Day 8. Dawn. Ethan stood in the castle courtyard. 29 girls stood before him. Madison stood off to the side. Bree stood in the shadows by the wall. 31 souls. First training session. He didn't know how to train mages. He didn't know how to train fighters. He knew how to train a team. 3 years as a volleyball assistant coach. Coach Morgan said the same thing every season. Skill without position is chaos. Position without trust is worthless. Trust without sweat is just words. Ethan started with positions. He divided the group into 5s, not at random, by stats, by classes, by compatibility. The Alpha 5. Gia, the tank, up front. Madison, the long-range mage. Ari, the healer, in the rear. Sophie, the oracle, next to Ethan. Olivia, support with artifacts. The Beta 5. Lena, the marksman. Hannah, the fire mage. Rachel, the shield. Mina, support. Christy, the scout. Gamma and Delta squads. Epsilon, Zeta. 5 people in each with its own tank, its own mage, its own healer. He didn't assign Bree to any of the teams. Her class, Voice of the Abyss, didn't fit into the standard structure. She stood by the wall, staring at the ground. He approached her later. The first exercise was simple. Formation. Line up in 3 seconds. They couldn't do it. 12 seconds. Pushing and shoving. Arguments over who stood where. Mina stepped on Hannah's foot. Lena lined up on the wrong side. Ethan said, "Again." They lined up in 9 seconds. Again. 7. Again. 5. Again. 4. He pushed them for 40 minutes. Form up. Run. Form up. Turn. Form up. No magic. No abilities. Just legs and discipline. Madison followed orders. Silently. Without enthusiasm. But she followed them. After the failure in the forest, she didn't argue. Her trust was at -3, still in the red, but the trend was upward. After the formations, he moved on to abilities. Each girl had to activate her class, show what she could do. Many didn't know. Hannah raised her hand, and a 2-meter-tall pillar of fire burst from her palm. She screamed in surprise and fell onto her back. The fire hit the castle wall. The stone turned black. Rachel activated a shield, a transparent dome of golden light, 3-meter radius, 200 HP. It lasted 4 seconds and burst. She doubled over and threw up. Mana overload. Mina turned out to be an enhancer, rank A. She could increase others' stats by 15% with a touch, but only one target at a time, and only if she touched them with bare skin. She blushed when Ethan explained the mechanics. It took him 3 hours, 27 girls, 27 classes, 27 sets of abilities. He memorized everything. Cooldowns, radii, restrictions, side effects. Rachel throws up after using her shield. Hannah's fire shoots off in random directions when she's nervous. Lena shoots accurately, but only with her right hand. Her left hand has a 40-degree spread. He kept track of it all in his head, just like in a debate. Argument, counter-argument, weakness, strength. By noon, everyone was exhausted. The group's readiness had dropped to 22. But this was a different kind of fatigue, not fear. Work. Ethan let them go for lunch. Olivia came out of the forge with a new batch. Not knives, arrowheads, 20 of them, for Lena. She handed them to Lena and said the balance was perfect, that she'd adjusted the center of gravity for her right hand. Lena took an arrowhead. She turned it over in her hand. She looked at Olivia. She said thank you. Olivia shrugged and went back into the forge. Her hands were covered in soot. She was smiling. After lunch, Ethan found Bree. She was sitting behind the stable, alone. Her hood was pulled down. 4 birds were perched on the ground around her. Small, blue, each with 3 eyes. They didn't fly away when he approached. They stared at him with 6 pairs of eyes. Bree lifted her head. Her face was pale. The shadows under her eyes were darker than the queen's. He didn't ask how she was. Didn't ask why she hadn't been training. He sat down next to her, a meter away, no closer, in silence. The birds shifted. 2 settled between them. 1 landed on Ethan's knee. Light. Warm. Its 3 eyes blinked out of sync. Bree looked at the bird, then at him. She said they were talking. Ethan asked what they were saying. She said the birds weren't singing music, words, in a language that shouldn't exist. She'd been hearing it since childhood. At home, she thought she was going crazy. Here, she realized she wasn't. Her voice was steady. Too steady. Like someone who'd been afraid for so long that the fear had passed right through her and come out the other side. Ethan didn't say everything would be okay. He didn't say he understood. He said he wanted her to come to practice tomorrow. Not the Friday practice, just out to the field, just to watch. She was silent. Then she nodded. The bird on his knee spread its wings and flew away. Bree's trust. 11. It was 9. It had gone up by 2 in 5 minutes of silence. The kitchen was noisy that evening, for the first time. Not from fear, from conversation. Hannah was telling everyone how she almost burned a hole in the wall. Rachel was complaining about feeling nauseous after using her shield. Mina was showing everyone how amplification worked and giggling. Sophie was sitting next to Ethan and quietly commenting. She said that Hannah couldn't control the direction of her fire because she was afraid of it. That Rachel was using 3 times as much mana as necessary because she was holding her shield as a sphere rather than a circle. A circle is cheaper. A sphere is prettier but pointless if the enemy is on the ground. Ethan listened and nodded. Sophie was his brain. She saw what he didn't see. Not the future, the mechanics. She understood how classes worked, like an engineer understands an engine, by the sound, by the vibration, by the logic. He asked her about her own class. She fell silent. Her smile faded. She said that a chronovider sees death, only death. She doesn't see victory. She doesn't see happy moments. Every vision is someone's demise. She saw team members dying. She saw their faces. She heard the sounds. She had seen her own death, twice. Ethan looked at her. Her trust was 28. Her readiness was 31. Her stress was 67. She smiled and joked. But inside she carried a burden that would have killed others. He said one sentence. "We'll change what you saw." She looked at him, for a long time. Then she said, "Okay, Cap, I'm in." Sophie's trust, 28. It went up to 33. A +5 for that one sentence. That night, he was patrolling the hallways again. Tactical survey. 30 checkpoints. Everyone's asleep. Ari isn't asleep. She's never the first to fall asleep. He walked past Barracks B. He heard a soft sound. Not sewing. Crying. Ari was crying. Quietly. Into her pillow. He stood by the door and listened. His hand rested on the doorknob. He didn't go in. Not because he didn't want to, because she didn't call him. And because if he went in every time someone cried at night, he wouldn't leave the barracks until dawn. 31 girls. Each carried her own pain. He couldn't carry it all for them. He could only build a structure in which they could support one another. He went back to his room, lay down, didn't sleep, stared at the ceiling and counted. 171 out of 3,100. 22 days. The pace is picking up, but it's not enough. Ethan conducted his first training session by dividing the group into 6 groups of 5 based on class and compatibility. 27 girls activated their abilities for the first time. Olivia forged arrowheads for Lena. Ethan spent time with Bree at the stables, and she agreed to come to training. Sophie revealed that her visions showed only the deaths of group members, including her own. The group's trust level rose to 171 out of 31,000 on the 8th day. Day 10. System checkpoint. Ethan woke up to a sound he hadn't heard before, a low hum, like a bass note on an organ. It was coming from everywhere, from the walls, from the floor, from the air. A blue panel flashed before his eyes. System notification. Proficiency test. Stone Devourer. Location, Eastern Forest, Sector 7, 3 miles from the castle. Threat level, A. Reward, Group XP ×2, Swarm Resonance Bonus. Condition, at least 3 party members must act in sync under the coordinator's command. Time limit, 12 hours. He got up, got dressed, stepped out into the hallway. The girls were already waking up. They'd heard the hum, too. They'd seen the notification, too. Gia was standing by the stairs, fully dressed, stone skin covering her arms up to her elbows. Readiness 58. She said one word. When? Ethan replied, after breakfast. She nodded. At breakfast, he announced the plan. Alpha 5 is heading for the Stone Eater. Gia, Madison, Ari, Sophie, himself. Olivia is staying at the castle. She's needed here. If they don't come back, someone has to forge weapons for the rest of us. Madison raised an eyebrow. She asked why she had to go with him. He replied, because her class is SS and her ice strikes at a range of 40 feet. Because the Stone Eater is made of stone, and ice breaks stone. Madison knew her physics. Water seeps into cracks. It freezes. It expands. It shatters the stone from the inside. She didn't answer, but she stood up and went to get dressed. Her trust was -3, below the 20 threshold. An order wouldn't work on her. She'd go as a free agent. No bonuses. No resonance shield. A risk. They set out at noon. 5 of them. Ethan was unarmed, strength 3, damage 0. He carried a backpack with water and rations. A tactician doesn't fight. A tactician thinks. 3 miles through the forest. Sophie walked beside him. Her eyes darted around. She saw something. Flashes. He asked. She said the Devourer was big, very big, and that it had a weak spot. But she couldn't see where. She just sensed it was there. They walked for an hour. The forest grew denser, the trees taller, the moss brighter. There were no sounds. No birds, no wind, a silence that weighed on their ears. Gia walked in front, Madison behind. Between them, Ari, small, quiet. A backpack with bandages and flasks. Her HP was 400 out of 400. Full health. But Ethan remembered. Every healing treatment cost her life force. He didn't know exactly how much, but he knew the price was high. The Stone Devourer was waiting for them in the clearing. The clearing was circular, 200 feet in diameter. The trees around it formed a wall, and in the middle of that circle stood the stone devourer, 10 meters tall. Its body was made of gray stone, 4 legs like columns, 2 arms with fingers of obsidian. Its head was small, its eyes were red, its mouth was open. Inside its mouth, stone jaws moved like those in a crusher. It was chewing the earth, slowly, methodically. Around it, the ground had been dug up to a meter deep. It was eating rock. The system displayed its stats. Stone Devourer, level 34, HP 12,000, strength 210, defense 180, weakness undefined. Ethan looked at his team of 5. Gia, strength 89, HP 1,800. Madison, magic 112, HP 900. Ari, healer, HP 400. Sophie, oracle, HP 600. Himself, strength 3, HP 280. 12,000 HP versus their combined 4,080. A 3-to-1 ratio in the monster's favor. A defense of 180 means that every attack from Gia, with her strength of 89, will deal pure damage minus defense. If the formula is linear, then 89 minus 180 is a negative number. She won't be able to break through it with her bare hands. She needs a bonus. She needs the command. Plus 30%. 89 plus 30% equals 116, minus 180 defense. It's still negative. It's not enough. But if Mina stayed at the castle, her boost is plus 15%. He's not here. Think. Ethan looked at the Devourer and thought. 3 years of debates. If an argument doesn't work head-on, look for a workaround. Defense 180. That's the total defense. But what if it's not uniform? What if there's a spot where the defense is lower? The weakness hasn't been identified. But Sophie said there is a weakness. He turned to her. He asked if she could focus her vision on the Devourer. She closed her eyes. 10 seconds. 20. The Devourer continued to chew on the ground. It didn't notice them. Sophie opened her eyes. They were white, completely, no pupils. She said, "Seams." Between the slabs on its back. The stone is thin there, 3 centimeters instead of 30. The defense at those points is about 40. Seams. Like seams on armor. Ethan looked. He saw them. Dark lines between the stone slabs on the creature's back. 4 lines, each half a meter long. He turned to the group. Quiet. Quick. Plan. Gia approaches from behind. Madison hits the joints with ice. Water seeps into the cracks. Freezes. Expands. The stone cracks. Gia finishes it off by striking the open crack. Ari keeps his distance. Heals if needed. Sophie stands next to him, making adjustments. Madison listened. Her face was stony. She said she wouldn't strike on command from a boy with a strength of 3. She'd strike when she saw her chance. Ethan looked at her. Her trust was at -3. An order wouldn't work. He couldn't force her. He said, "Fine, hit whenever you want, but aim for the joints." She snorted. They took up their positions. Gia circled around the clearing to the right. Madison positioned herself at the 12 o'clock position relative to the Devourer. Ethan, Sophie, and Ari took up positions behind a fallen tree, 180 feet from the creature, within the tactical view radius. Ethan could see everyone. Stats, cooldowns, readiness. He raised his hand, lowered it. The signal. Madison struck first. A pillar of ice shot from her palms and slammed into the Devourer's back. Not at a seam, right in the center of the plate. The ice shattered into shards. 45 damage out of 12,000. A drop in the bucket. The Devourer turned, slowly. Its red eyes locked onto Madison. It opened its mouth. A sound. A roar that struck her ears like a sledgehammer. The ground shook. Madison's son took a step back. Her readiness dropped from 34 to 28. Fear. She hadn't hit the seams. Ethan could have shouted at her, "The seams!" But if he shouted, the Devourer would turn toward him. 280 HP. One swipe of its paw, and he'd be dead. He remained silent. Gia attacked from behind. A stone fist into the seam between the slabs. A crack. 340 damage. The devourer spun around. Faster than a 10-meter carcass should be able to turn. His hand flashed. Gia took the blow with her arms crossed. 680 damage. Her HP dropped from 1,800 to 1,120. She was sent flying 5 meters. She rolled across the ground. She got back up. The stone skin on her arms was cracked. Ethan gave the order. Gia, get out of there. Now. A blue flash. Plus 30% speed. Gia darted to the side. The devourer's paw struck the ground where she had been standing a second ago. A crater 2 meters in diameter. Madison struck again, this time at the seam. Ice seeped into the gap between the slabs. She maintained the flow. Water filled the crack. It froze. It expanded. A cracking sound, like concrete cracking. The slab on the devourer's back split open. Gray flesh was exposed beneath it. Soft, unprotected. Madison's damage jumped up. 890. 12,000 minus 45 minus 340 minus 890. The devourer's HP. 10,725. Still enormous. Ethan did the math. At this rate, the fight would last 20 minutes. Gia had 1,120 HP. One more hit she took, and she'd be in the red. Madison's mana isn't infinite. Ari's healing costs health. They need to act faster. He looked at Sophie. He asked if they could shatter more slabs at once. Sophie closed her eyes. She opened them. She said that 4 joints converged at a single point on the nape. If they struck there, all 4 slabs would shatter at once. The nape. The height is 7 meters. Madison strikes from the ground. Her ice reaches it, but at an angle. A vertical strike is needed, from top to bottom. Who can jump 7 meters? No one. Gia, with the command bonus, jumps 4. Madison isn't a melee fighter. But Madison isn't the only mage. There's him. 3 strength, 1 magic. Useless. He looked at the system. Roy's coordinator. Abilities. Tactical overview. Command. Roy's resonance. Roy's resonance. If 3 or more party members act in sync under his command, everyone receives bonus experience and a shared shield of 500 HP. 3 members. In sync. On command. Command only works with trust 20 or higher. Gia, 40. Works. Ari, 42. Works. Madison, -3. Doesn't work. Sophie, 33. Works. But Sophie isn't a fighter. Her class is Oracle. She sees but doesn't attack. 3 fighters. Gia, Madison, Ari. Ari is a healer, not an attacking class. But she has hands, and she has blood. He remembered. Living Spring. S rank, healer. Healers in games sometimes have 1 attacking ability. Holy Strike, Purification, something like the opposite, reverse healing. He called out to Ari, asked if she had an offensive ability. She froze, looked at her panel. It took a while. Then she said, yes, Bloody Thorn, B rank, fires a needle made of her own blood, 200 damage, cost, 80 HP. 1 needle costs her 80 health points. Out of 400, 5 shots and she's dead. He didn't ask her to fire, he asked her to be ready. 1 needle, at the right moment, on his command. She nodded. He turned back to the fight. The devourer was chasing Gia. She was dodging. Madison was striking the exposed plate on its back with ice. The damage was piling up. 600, 500, 700. The creature's HP was dropping. 8,200, 7,600, 7,000. But Gia was getting tired. Her readiness was dropping. 44, 38, 33. 1 mistake and it's over. Ethan waited. He counted. When the devourer's HP dropped to 5,000, he gave his second order of the battle. Gia, the nape, jump, now. A blue flash. Gia lunged at the creature. Not away from it, but toward it. The devourer swung. Gia dove under its arm, slid between its legs, and pushed off the ground 4 meters up. Her stone fist struck the nape of its neck, right where the 4 joints met. A crack. 4 slabs burst open simultaneously. A square meter of flesh was exposed. The devourer roared. Ethan shouted, "Madison, the joints are open, hit it!" Not an order, a request. She isn't obligated to listen. She looked at him across the clearing. 3 seconds. Then she raised both hands. A half-meter thick pillar of ice struck the exposed nape. 2,200 damage. The devourer staggered. Ethan shouted a third command. "Ari, Bloody Thorn, the nape, now!" A blue flash on Ari. She her hand. A half-meter-long red needle shot out of her palm. It entered the open wound on the devourer's nape. 200 damage. Critical hit. Multiplier times 3. 600 damage. Ari's HP dropped by 80, from 400 to 320. 3 commands, 3 party members, in sync. The system exploded with notifications. Resonance Row was activated. Bonus XP times 2, a shared shield of 500 HP for all party members. A golden glow enveloped all 5 of them. The devourer collapsed. HP 0. The ground shook. Dust rose in a cloud. When it settled, the stone devourer lay on its side, dead. The system showered them with rewards, experience, levels. Gia gained 2 levels, Madison gained 1, Ari gained 2, Sophie gained 1 level, Ethan gained 1 level. His stats remained unchanged, Strength 3, Magic 1. Leveling up only affected HP and MP. His maximum HP rose from 280 to 310. 30 points. The difference between life and death was as small as a sparrow's wing beat. Madison stood in the middle of the clearing. Ice was melting on her hands. She was breathing heavily. She looked at Ethan. Not with hatred, not with respect, with something in between. She said, "Your plan worked." He replied, "Your ice worked." She turned away, but he saw it. Madison's trust. -3. Now +2. In the positive for the first time. Ari was sitting on the ground, pale. HP 320. She'd spent 80 health on a single needle. She was smiling. She said, "Cap, I didn't know I could shoot. Thanks for asking." Ari's trust. 42. Now 48. Sophie stood next to him. She said quietly, "You were crying last night. I heard you through the wall. Don't stop." He looked at her. She wasn't smiling. She was serious. The whole group's trust. The system calculated. When they returned to the castle and about their victory, when the girls saw the loot from the devourer, stone core, material for rank A artifacts, Olivia grabbed it with both hands and said they could forge a shield for Gia out of it. A real one. Not fists, a shield. Plus 10 trust from the entire group. Total trust, 312 out of 3,100. Day 10 of 30. The system issued a test. An A-rank stone devourer with 12,000 HP, Alpha 5 went out on the hunt. Sophie found a weakness in the joints between the stone slabs. Madison executed Ethan's tactical plan for the first time, albeit without an order. Ari discovered the Bloodthorn's offensive ability, which costs 80 HP per shot. Resonance Row resonance triggered for the first time. Madison's trust went into the positive. Total trust, 312 out of 3,100. Olivia received a stone core for Gia's shield. Days 11 through 14 merged into one long march. Training. Morning. Fall in within 3 seconds. Running around the courtyard. Activating abilities. Each 5-person squad practiced their coordination. Tank in front. Mage behind. Healer in the rear. Scout on the flank. During the day, Ethan led the squads into the forest one by one. Not far in, half a mile from the castle. Small creatures, levels 5 through 10. Lizards made of black slime. Spiders with stone carapaces. 2-meter-long worms. Each 5-person team had to kill 3 in an hour. Alpha 5 managed it in 20 minutes, Beta 5 in 40, Gamma and Delta in 50. Epsilon and Zeta didn't make the cut. Their tanks were weak. Rachel L and Epsilon held the shield for 4 seconds. That wasn't enough. Ethan reshuffled the team. He took Hana from Beta and put her in Epsilon. Firepower plus a shield. Hana attacks. Rachel provides cover. 4 seconds is enough if Hana hits on the first try. Hana hit on the first try when she wasn't nervous. She was always nervous. Ethan approached her after the 3rd training session. He asked what she was afraid of. She replied that she was afraid of burning one of her own. He nodded. He said that during the next training session, Gia would stand 3 meters in front of the target, and that Hana would shoot past Gia. Hana turned pale. She said she couldn't do it. He said that Gia, in her stone form, could withstand a direct hit. 1,800 HP. Hana's fire deals 180 damage. 10 point-blank hits, and Gia wouldn't even break a sweat. Hana looked at Gia. Gia nodded. Not a word. They ran through the drill 6 times. The first 3 times, Hana missed on purpose. She shot at the ground, at the wall, at the sky. The 4th time, she hit the target. The 5th time, too. The 6th time, she hit the target, and Gia was standing 2 meters away from the fire. She didn't flinch. Hana didn't burn Gia. Hana cried with relief. Her accuracy had gone from 40 to 70% in a single day. The fear was gone. Not all of it, but enough. Olivia forged without stopping. A shield for Gia made of stone core. 3 days of work. She slept 4 hours at a time. She ate at the anvil. Ethan brought her food twice a day. She didn't say thank you. She said the food was cold, or that the bread was hard, or that she didn't need food but an assistant. He didn't take offense. He knew people like that. His mother was like that. Love through grumbling. Care through complaints. On the 13th day, Olivia stepped out of the forge. In her hands, she held a shield. Round, 80 centimeters in diameter, gray stone veined with gold. Lightweight, durable. The system displayed its specifications. The stone hive shield. Quality, excellent. Defense plus 120. Bonus, absorbs 30% of physical damage. Special effect. Upon receiving a critical hit, the owner gains a stone shell for 5 seconds. Invulnerability. Cooldown, 300 seconds. Gia took the shield. Her hands were trembling. She didn't cry. Gia never cried. But her lips were pressed into a thin line. She turned to Olivia. She said it was the best gift of her life. Olivia shrugged and said it wasn't a gift, but a tool, and that if Gia broke it, she'd personally beat her to a pulp. The recognition lottery flashed. 3 words of gratitude for the day. Prize. Minor recovery elixir. 5 of them. Restores 200 HP instantly. Ethan gave all 5 to Ari. She took them silently. She looked at the vials, then at him. She wanted to say something. She didn't. She put the vials in her bag. Her HP was 400 out of 400, but he knew that every healing took something from her. Not HP, something deeper. He didn't know exactly what yet. The 14th day, halfway through, Ethan sat in the officer's lounge, studying a map of the castle. The 3rd basement, locked. The keeper's key. He didn't know where the key was. He didn't know what was behind the basement. But basements aren't locked for no reason. Someone is hiding something valuable or dangerous. He decided to ask the Queen, at his next visit. On the evening of the 14th day, something happened he hadn't expected. A warm evening, the kitchen, all 31 of them, for the first time. Even Bree. She was sitting on the edge of the table, her hood pulled down to her eyebrows, but she was sitting there, with the others. Sophie was telling a story. She was explaining to Mina what a meme was. Mina didn't understand. Sophie drew a picture on a napkin, a crooked cat with some text. Mina laughed. Then Hana laughed. Then Lena. Then the whole table. Olivia was sitting next to Ethan. She was fixing Ari's glasses. The arm had broken when the bus crashed. Olivia bent the wire. She tried it on Ari. It was crooked. She bent it some more, tried it on again. It was straight. Ari put on the glasses. The world came into sharp focus. She smiled. A small, quiet smile. Ethan watched the scene and, for the first time in 2 weeks, felt something other than calculation. Warmth. Not physical, something else. He laughed. Quietly, almost inaudibly. Sophie looked at him and said that this was the first time he'd laughed and that she would remember this moment. A knock at the door. Sharp. 3 knocks. Everyone fell silent. Ethan stood up. He opened the door. Standing there was a messenger in the castle's livery, a small man with shifty eyes. He held out a bottle of wine. He said it was a gift from the court, in honor of the Chosen One's 2-week anniversary. Ethan took the bottle. He looked at it. Dark glass, a seal. The wine looked expensive. He brought the bottle to his nose. He sniffed the cork. Roses. And something else. Bitter. Barely perceptible. He knew that smell. His mother had told him about it. At the military base, a survival instructor had shown them how to identify poisons in the field. Bitter almonds. Cyanide smells like bitter almonds. This isn't cyanide. This world doesn't have cyanide. But bitterness followed by sweetness, that's a classic poisoner's trick. He set the bottle on the table. He said no one was drinking it. Madison raised an eyebrow. She asked why. He replied that the wine didn't smell right. Sophie walked over. She took a sniff. She said she couldn't smell anything. Ethan turned to Ari. He asked if Living Spring could detect poison. Ari took the bottle. She dripped some onto her finger. Her finger glowed green, then red. She pulled her hand away. She said one word. Poison. A nerve agent. A dose strong enough for 20 people. The kitchen fell into absolute silence. 20 people, not 31. Someone in the castle knew how many usually dined there. Someone had been counting. Someone had been watching. Ethan looked at the messenger. He was already running down the hallway. Gia lunged after him. A stone-hard hand grabbed him by the collar, lifted him up. He dangled in the air like a rag doll. He screamed that he knew nothing, that he'd been ordered to do it. Who had ordered it? He wouldn't say. Gia tightened her grip. He started talking. Lord Chancellor Moore, from his cell, through a guard. The guard passed the poison to the messenger. The messenger brought the wine. Moore was arrested, but his network was still operating. Ethan memorized the guard's name. Tomorrow he would go to the Queen. Not to complain, with evidence. Just like in a debate. Facts, a chain of events, a conclusion. He let the messenger go. Gia gently set him down on the floor. The messenger ran away. The warm evening was ruined. The girls dispersed to their rooms. In silence. Fear returned. The group's readiness dropped by 8 points. But trust in the leader rose by 12. Because he found the poison. Because he saved 20 lives with a single whiff. 324 out of 3,100. Number 312 plus 12. 324. The 14th day. Halfway there. He lay in the darkness and counted. 324. Halfway there. We need 3,100. In the remaining 16 days, he needs to earn 2,776 points. 173 per day. 3 times the current pace. Impossible with the current strategy. A different approach is needed. More needs to be put on trial, a public one, a high-profile one. Not for Moore, for the group. So that everyone could see that he protects them not with his fists, but with his mind. That his 3 powers aren't a weakness. They're a different kind of weapon. Day 16, the throne room. Ethan stood before the Queen, not as a supplicant, as a prosecutor. He'd spent 2 days preparing. 2 days he could have spent training, but the trial was more important. In a debate, it's not the one who shouts the loudest who wins. It's the one with the thicker file. His file was thick. He started with the numbers. The East Wing's budget for 2 weeks. The food allocated by the Queen. The food actually delivered. The difference? 40%. 40% of the food disappeared between the castle kitchen and the east wing. Someone was stealing. The trail led to the quartermaster. The quartermaster reported to the treasurer. The treasurer had been appointed by Moore. He continued. Security for the east wing. 4 guards on the roster. Only 2 were actually on duty. The other 2 received their pay but never showed up at their posts. The money went to Moore. Through an intermediary. Through the same guard who had slipped the poison to the messenger. The queen listened. Her face was impassive, but her hands clenched on the armrests. Moore stood in shackles before the throne. He was calm. Too calm for a man accused of poisoning. He was smiling. Ethan knew that smile. The smile of a man who holds the trump card. Moore spoke. He said that the boy from the third power was playing detective, that the numbers could be faked, that the messenger's testimony had been extracted under the pressure of Gia's iron fist, that under Valerian law, torture does not constitute evidence. Ethan had been waiting for this argument. He turned toward the door. It opened. Sophie entered, followed by Olivia. They were carrying a scroll, a large one. Sophie unrolled it on the floor in front of the throne. It was a map of Moore's financial flows for the past year. Every transaction, every intermediary, every account. Ethan hadn't faked the numbers. He'd found them. Sophie knew where to look. Her visions had shown her a room in the castle's basement. The archives. Dusty books. Page numbers. She hadn't seen the contents, only the layout. Ethan sent Olivia to pick the lock on the archive door. Her blacksmith's hands had it open in 3 minutes. They found the books. The numbers matched. Moore turned paler with every line that Ethan read aloud. Not quickly, slowly, like a man who realizes that the wall behind him is actually the edge of a cliff. Ethan reached the final clause. The contract. Moore had signed a contract with an unknown party. The seal on the document was black, not red like that of the Valerian court, not blue like that of the Mages Guild, black. Ethan didn't know who that seal was, but he saw the queen turn pale at the sight of the black wax. She knew. Moore knew that she knew. His smile finally faded. He said one word. Enough. Then he fell silent. The queen stood up. She was tall, thin, emaciated. But at that moment, she was the queen. She declared that Lord Chancellor Darius Moore was guilty of embezzlement, of attempting to take the lives of the chosen, of treason. The sentence: stripping of his title, confiscation of his property, imprisonment in the Tower for the rest of his days. Moore did not flinch. They led him away. When the doors closed behind him, he turned and looked at Ethan. Not with hatred, with interest. Like a scientist observing an unexpected experimental result. Ethan remembered that look. Moore was dangerous even in chains. The queen turned to him. She was silent for 10 seconds. Then she spoke. Commander of the First Swarm. An official title, a seal, authority. The right to issue orders to the castle garrison regarding the security of the East Wing. The right to trade on behalf of the crown. The right to recruit people into the squad. The throne room was full. Courtiers, servants, advisors, guards, and 23 girls from his group who had come to watch. The remaining 8 had stayed in the wing on his orders. Someone had to guard the base. 23 pairs of eyes watched as the boy with Force 3 dismantled the kingdom's records. Just like in a debate. Only instead of the judges' scores, lives were at stake. The system flashed. Title: Commander of the First Swarm. Trust: plus 84 from 28 group members. Total trust: 408 out of 3,100. A jump, the very one he'd been waiting for. Not 12 points, 84. But that wasn't enough. 408. He needed 3,100. 16 days had passed. 14 remained. 2,692 points in 14 days. 192 a day. The pace had picked up, but it still wasn't enough. He needed another jump. Or 2. Or 3. That evening Madison came to see him. Not to the kitchen. To the officers' quarters. She knocked. She came in. She closed the door. She was holding a rolled-up sheet of paper in her hands, a map of the castle. She unrolled it on the table. She pointed to it. Basements, corridors, secret passages. She said that Moore had shown her this map on the third day, when he'd offered her the throne. He'd said there were passages in the castle that weren't on the official plans, passages leading to the Tower of Silence, to the archives, to the third basement. Ethan looked at her. Her trust rating was +2. Just now, he looked again. +7. It had risen during the trial. She hadn't applauded him. She didn't praise him. But she came. With a map. With information. She said one sentence. "Moore offered me the throne. I want you to know." He nodded. He asked what she'd told Moore back then. She said she'd replied, "Maybe." That on the third day she hadn't decided yet. That she'd decided now. She turned toward the door. She paused. She didn't turn back. She said, "You're not dead weight, Reed. You're a different kind of weapon." And she left. Madison's trust, 7. It's now 12, +5 for one visit. Ethan looked at the map. Secret passages. The third basement. He now knew 2 ways to get there. The official one through the locked door with the keeper's key, and the unofficial one through the secret passage behind Olivia's smithy. He'd go tomorrow. But first, training. 14 days. The court's selection was approaching, and with it came the 7 emissaries of the 7 gods. Each wanted to take a piece of his group. Each was stronger than anything they'd ever faced. He lay down on the straw. He closed his eyes. He wasn't asleep. He was counting. Day 20. 10 days until the selection. Ethan led the Alpha 5 through the secret passage behind Olivia's smithy. The passage was narrow. The stone walls were covered with moss that didn't glow. Dead moss. The air smelled musty and sour. Gia walked ahead with her shield. Madison followed her, ice on her fingertips. Ari in the center. Sophie next to Ethan, a torch in his hand. He'd carved it from a chair leg and wrapped it in oiled cloth. Olivia stayed upstairs. She said basements weren't for her. She said she'd be forging. She was always forging. The passage led downward, a steep descent. The steps were uneven, hewn out of the rock, not by builders, by someone in a hurry. 10 minutes later, they emerged into a circular hall. The ceiling was 5 meters high. The walls were smooth, black stone, obsidian, just like Olivia's anvil. In the middle of the hall stood a pedestal. An object lay on the pedestal, a sphere, the size of a human head, transparent. A light moved inside it, not a magical light, a familiar light, white, flickering, like a phone screen in the dark. Ethan approached. The system provided a description. Sphere of memory, an artifact of the ancients. Class, unknown. Function, storage and playback of memories. Link, summoning key. Summoning key. The very artifact that had transported them here. The sphere was linked to the key. Ethan reached out his hand. The system warned him. Contact with the artifact may cause unforeseen consequences. He touched the sphere. A flash, white, just like during the teleportation. He was standing in the throne room. But not now. 1,000 years ago. He saw it. A group of people, 15, not 31, 15, wearing clothes that didn't belong to this world. Military uniforms, old ones, leather belts, steel helmets, rifles, soldiers. A man stood before them, young, 20, maybe 22, short hair, a scar on his chin. A panel glowed above his head. Roy's coordinator, the first. Ethan looked at him and saw himself. The same caliber, the same gaze of a man who calculates while others panic. The coordinator stood before the king. Not the queen, the king, a man in golden armor. The coordinator was speaking. The words were indistinct, like a radio with static. But Ethan caught fragments. He was talking about a return, about the key, about the price. The king shook his head. The coordinator insisted. Then he fell silent. His face changed. Something happened, something Ethan didn't see. The coordinator raised his hand. The panel above his head flashed. Coordinator Roy, class deactivated. A new class has been loaded. The name is unclear. The letters were blurring. Ethan could only make out the first three. A, R, H. The vision cut off. He was standing in the basement. His hand was on the sphere. 5 seconds had passed. Or 5 minutes. He didn't know. Ari was holding his elbow. She asked if everything was all right. He nodded. His head was spinning. His ears were ringing. A, R, H. Archon. The first coordinator had become an Archon of the Court of Bones. The very same Archon who, according to the system, had been hunting for Bree. 1,000 years ago, there was a man with the same class as Ethan. He came with a group from another world. He didn't return home. He became a god, or something like a god, and now he wants them. Ethan pulled his hand away from the sphere. He turned to face the group. Their faces were pale in the torchlight. He didn't tell them everything. Not now. Too much. Too soon. He said the sphere held the memory of the first summoning, that it would take time to make sense of it, that they were going back upstairs. Sophie looked at him. Her white oracle eyes were active. She could see what he was hiding. She didn't ask. She just nodded. They went upstairs. In the smithy, Olivia was hammering away. She didn't even notice they'd returned. Ethan walked past her into the hallway. He went up to the second floor. He sat down in the officers' quarters. He closed his eyes. A.R.H. Archon, first coordinator. 1,000 years ago, he stood in that very same spot. The same walls, the same castle, the same system. He made a choice. He stayed. He became something else. Why? What happened that made him refuse to return? Ethan didn't know, but he knew one thing. If a coordinator can become an Archon, then the class isn't locked. That means 3 powers isn't the ceiling. It's the starting point. The question was, at what cost? The first coordinator paid with 1,000 years and 15 lives from his group. Ethan stood up. He went out into the courtyard. 10 days until the selection. He watched the training. Gamma Squad was practicing a flanking maneuver. Delta Squad was training a retreat under shield cover. Bree was standing by the wall. She had come. Every day for the past 5 days she had come to training. She didn't participate, she just watched, but she was there. Today, something was different. She was standing with her hood down, for the first time. Her hair was dark, long. Her face was pale. Her eyes were brown, large. She was beautiful. Ethan hadn't noticed before. The hood had hidden it. She wasn't watching the training. She was looking at the forest beyond the wall. Her lips were moving. She was speaking, silently, in a language that shouldn't exist. Ethan walked over. He stood beside her. He asked who she was talking to. She answered, to them. He looked at the woods. Shadows were moving among the trees. 3, 4, 5 creatures. But they weren't attacking. They stood behind the line of trees and listened. Bree was speaking, and they were listening. He asked what she was saying. She replied that she was asking them to leave, that they had come because they could sense her blood, that her scent was like a beacon to them, that they didn't want to attack. They just wanted to be near her. He asked why. She fell silent, for a long time. Then she said she didn't know, but she had a hunch, that she wasn't like the others, that her blood was older than this world, that the monsters recognized her because they'd been waiting for her for a long time. He didn't press her for more details, not now. Instead, he asked if she could ask them not to attack the castle at night. She looked at him, for the first time, straight into his eyes, brown eyes meeting brown. She said, yes, I can try. She turned toward the forest. She spoke louder. The sounds were low, guttural, not a human language. The shadows behind the trees froze. Then they retreated, slowly, one by one. A minute later, the forest was empty. Quiet, as always, but a different kind of silence. Not threatening, peaceful. Bree turned to him. She said, "They won't come tonight, or tomorrow. I asked them not to." She didn't smile, but her hood remained pulled down. Bree's trust. 18. It had been 11 weeks ago. Growth was slow, but steady. At night, Ethan lay there and thought. 10 days. Trust level, 492 out of 3,100. After the trial and the hunt for the devourer and Bree and the trading and the training, 492. Less than 1/6. 10 days. 2,608 points. 260 a day. With a current record of 84 per day. 3 times the record. Every day. No slumps. He rolled over. He buried his face in the straw. The straw smelled of dust and a foreign world. He thought. 3 words. 31 cards of a single player. He thought about the first coordinator. 1,000 years ago. 15 soldiers. The coordinator who became the Archon. What happened to his group? Where are they? Are they alive? Or have they become fuel for the god who gnaws through reality? The Ash Rift. The 3rd year. 40 miles in the last month. The god who devours the world. The Archon. The first coordinator. The former leader of the former group. Now the enemy. He wants Bree. He wants them all. As fuel. Ethan clenched his fists. 3 forces. 0 damage. Against a god who is 1,000 years old. Against the 7 courts, who will come to take his people in 10 days. Against the ticking clock. He hadn't slept. He'd been counting. And planning. Every hour of every remaining day. Every order. Every training session. Every word to every girl. Everything had to be precise. Everything had to work. Because if it didn't, 72 hours and then silence. Ethan found the sphere of memory in the 3rd basement and saw a vision. 1,000 years ago, the first coordinator of the swarm arrived with a group of 15 soldiers. He refused to return, and his rank changed to Archon. The first coordinator became the Archon of the Court of Bones. Bree took off her hood for the first time and spoke to the creatures in the language of monsters. She forced them to retreat from the castle. Group 492's trust rating. 3,100 out of 3,100 on the 20th day. 10 days until the selection of the courts. Day 22. 8 days until the selection. Ethan stood on the castle wall and gazed at the horizon. To the south, the sky was black. Not the black of night, different. Black as soot. Like smoke from a fire that wasn't there. The Ash Rift. It was far away, 200 miles according to the court mage, but the blackness was spreading. A month ago, the horizon had been clear. Now a quarter of the southern sky had been swallowed by darkness. 40 miles in a month. Ethan had been keeping track. At this rate, the rift would reach Valeria in 5 months. If it sped up, in 3. If it sped up even faster, they wouldn't have time to do anything. Sophie stood beside him. She was silent. Her eyes were normal, not white. There were no visions today. She said that was worse. When she has visions, at least she knows what's coming. When she doesn't, she's just afraid. Ethan climbed down from the wall. Training, day 22. The routine had settled in. Morning roll call, running, drills in 5s. In the afternoon, a trip to the forest, hunting creatures of levels 10 through 15. All 6 groups were working. Even Epsilon, who 2 weeks ago couldn't kill a spider. Hannah fired firebolts with 80% accuracy. Rachel held her shield for 6 seconds. Mina boosted 2 people per battle instead of just 1. But Ethan needed more. Not levels, not stats, trust. 492 out of 3,100. Day 22, 8 days left. 2,608 points in 8 days, 326 per day. 4 times the record. He couldn't earn that much using conventional methods. He needed a breakthrough. and the breakthrough came on its own. During morning practice, Sophie collapsed, right in the middle of the courtyard. Without a scream, she just crumpled like a felled tree. Her eyes rolled back, her body convulsed. Ari rushed to her side, her hands glowed green. The treatment wasn't helping. It wasn't an injury, a vision, the longest one of her life, 4 minutes. When she came to, she was lying in Ethan's arms. 20 girls stood around them, silent. Sophie grabbed him by the collar of his shirt and pulled him toward her. Her voice was hoarse. She said, "They're coming. Sooner. Not in 8 days. Tomorrow." Who? The emissaries. The 7 courts. They'd found out about Moore's trial. They'd learned that the group of the chosen wasn't divided, that the boy with a power of 3 was holding them together. They'd decided not to wait. They were coming to take what was theirs now. Ethan set Sophie down on the ground. He stood up. He looked at the group. 30 faces. Fear. Confusion. The group's readiness had dropped from 38 to 24 in a minute. Trust hadn't fallen. Trust doesn't fall because of bad news. Trust falls because of bad decisions. He hadn't made a decision yet, so there was still time. He told everyone to gather in the kitchen in 10 minutes. The kitchen. 31 souls. He stood by the stove. Not at the table, not on a platform. By the stove, where he cooked breakfast every morning. He said, 7 emissaries will arrive tomorrow, each from one of the courts of the gods. Each wants to take one of you. They have the right under the law of Valerian. The chosen are distributed among the courts, 1 hero to 1 court. Silence. Madison stood against the wall. Her hands were clenched. Ice covered her fists. She knew the Court of Winter wanted her. Moore had told her so. Gia stood with her shield behind her back. Her face was stony, literally. Stony skin crept across her cheekbones. Stress. Bree sat in the corner, her hood pulled down over her eyebrows. She didn't move. Ari stood next to Ethan. Her hands clutched a bag of bandages. Ethan continued. He said that the law of Valerian grants the emissaries the right to choose 1 chosen one each, but that same law grants the chosen ones the right to refuse, through a duel. If a representative of the group defeats a representative of the court in a duel, the court loses the right to choose. 1 duel, 1 chance. He said he wouldn't give anyone up, not a single one. He said they were 31 cards in a single player's hand. It was the first time everyone had heard that phrase. The first time it had been spoken aloud, out loud, in the stone kitchen, by torchlight. 30 pairs of eyes were watching him. 23 seconds of silence. Then Gia stepped forward. She said her shield was his shield. Then Ari. She said her hands were his hands. Then Sophie. She said her eyes were his eyes. Then Olivia. She said her hammer was his hammer. Then Bree, quietly, from the corner. She said her voice was his voice. 5. Then Hannah, Mina, Rachel, Lena, Christy. 10. Then the others, one by one. The voices stacked up like stones in a wall. 20, 25, 28, 30. Madison was the last to stand. Everyone was looking at her. She was silent. 5 seconds. 10. Then she said, "If you lose, I'll personally freeze you in an ice coffin, Reed." That was a yes, in her language. 31. That was it. The system exploded. Plus 340 trust, all at once, from all 30. Total trust, 832 out of 3,100. A jump, a huge one. But still only a quarter. Ethan didn't show what he was thinking. He nodded, said thank you, turned to the stove and started kneading dough for dinner, because tomorrow there would be a fight. And you have to eat before a fight. Sophie received an urgent vision. 7 emissaries from the courts would arrive a day early. Ethan gathered the group and announced that he wouldn't give anyone up. All 31 girls stood behind him, including Madison. Trust jumped 340 points to 832 out of 3,100. Tomorrow is the court's selection. Day 23. They arrived at dawn, 7 horsemen, each in the armor of their respective court. the court of fire in red, the court of water in blue, the court of earth in brown, the court of wind in white, the court of winter in silver, the court of light in gold, the house of bones, a black horse, black armor, no crest. The emissary of the house of bones did not remove his helmet. Ethan stood in the castle courtyard. Behind him were 31 girls. In formation, 6 rows of 5. In position. Each in her place, Gia in front, shield in her left hand, stone-like skin from her fingertips to her shoulders. Madison on the right, ice on her hands, cold eyes. Ari in the rear. Sophie next to Ethan. Bree on the left flank, hood pulled down, but she was standing, not in the corner, in formation. The queen stepped out onto the balcony. Her face was pale. She knew what was happening. She couldn't intervene. Alarion's law takes precedence over a royal decree. The courts had the right. The emissary of the court of fire spoke first. He removed his helmet. A young man, red hair, red eyes. He said that the court of fire had chosen Hannah Lee, an A-rank fire mage. Ethan stepped forward. He said he refused. The emissary raised an eyebrow. He asked on what grounds. Ethan replied that it was by virtue of the right of the representatives' duel. Article 47 of the Code of the Courts. He had spent the night in the castle library. He read the laws. Sophie helped him. Her visions showed him the right pages. The fire emissary smirked. He said that while a duel is a right, it is not the court's obligation to accept the challenge. Ethan replied that Article 48 states the opposite. If the challenge is issued publicly in the presence of witnesses from 3 or more courts, the court is obligated to accept it or forfeit the right to choose for 10 years. 6 emissaries stood nearby. 6 witnesses. The fire emissary stopped smiling. He accepted the challenge. Ethan turned to Hannah. He said she wouldn't be the one to fight. A duel between representatives means that any member of the group can act on the group's behalf. He turned to Gia. Gia stepped forward, shield in hand, stone on her skin. The representative of the court of fire removed his cloak. Beneath it was armor made of volcanic glass. His stats blazed above his head. Level 52. Strength 180. Magic 95. HP 4,500. Gia. Level 18. Strength 112 after training. HP 2,400. Defense with shield 210. A 2-level difference. 1.5 times the strength. Gia would lose in a protracted battle. Ethan knew that. She needed a quick victory. He gave the order. Gia, shield, charge, now. A blue flash. Plus 30%. Strength 146. HP remained unchanged, but her speed increased. Gia surged forward. The fire representative struck first. A pillar of flame shot from his palm. Direct hit. Gia blocked it with her shield. Stone Roy's shield absorbed 30% of the damage. The fire flared out to the sides. Gia emerged from the flames as if from a curtain. Her stone skin was red hot. She didn't stop. The shield slammed into the fire representative's chest. 580 damage. He was sent flying. He rolled across the stone courtyard. He got back up. Blood trickled from his split lip. HP 3,920 out of 4,500. He smirked and struck again. A double strike. Fire from the left. Fire from the right. Gia blocked the left one with her shield. The right one hit her shoulder. 340 damage. HP 2,060. She staggered. Ethan saw her stats. Readiness 62. Trust 55. Shield 5 seconds. If she takes a critical hit, the shield will grant invulnerability. He shouted to Gia, "Expose your chest!" Now, a crazy order, to leave herself exposed to a fire mage. Gia didn't hesitate. Trust 55. She trusted him. She lowered her shield. The fire representative saw an open target. He struck, with all his might. A critical hit. A pillar of fire into her chest. The system activated. Stone Roy's shield. Special effect, stone shell. 5 seconds of invulnerability. Gray stone covered Gia from head to toe. The fire crashed down on her. 0 damage. 0. She stood in the fire like a statue. The fire representative froze. 5 seconds. Gia emerged from the shell. The stone crumbled away. She struck, not with her fist, with her shield, from a spinning motion, to the temple. Critical hit. Multiplier times 3. 580 multiplied by 3. 1,740 damage. The fire representative collapsed. HP 2,180. Not dead, but on his knees. His eyes were glazed over. Concussion. He raised his hand. I surrender. The Court of Fire had lost its right to choose. Kana remained with the group. The emissary of water exchanged a glance with the emissary of earth. They chose not to select. They stated that the Court of Water and the Court of Earth were voluntarily relinquishing their right to choose. 2 courts backed down after witnessing a single fight. The Wind emissary chose Mina. Ethan challenged her to a duel. The Beta 5 put Lena forward, an archer against a wind mage. Lena fired with Olivia's arrowheads. 3 arrows. 2 hit. The Wind emissary fell a minute later. The 4th court lost its right. The 5th, the Court of Light. They chose Ari. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Ari, his healer, his anchor. 400 HP. She's not a fighter. Bloody Thorn deals 80 HP damage per shot. 5 shots and she's dead. He couldn't put her out there. He put Rachel out there. A shield for 6 seconds. Against the Light's emissary with beams that burn through stone. Rachel held out for 90 seconds. She took 3 hits. Her HP dropped to a critical level. But she didn't give up. At the 4-minute mark, Ethan gave the order. Roy's resonance. 3 fighters at once. Rachel, Hana, Mina. Shield plus fire plus buff. The golden dome flared up. A 500 HP shared shield. The emissary of light retreated. His attacks couldn't penetrate the resonance. He raised his hand. Recall. Ari remained. The 6th, the Court of Winter. The emissary in silver armor removed her helmet. A woman, white hair, white eyes. The Ice Knight. Level 61, Magic 200, HP 5,000. She looked at Madison. She said one word. Sister. Madison turned pale. The Ice Knight said that a fragment of the god of winter lives within Madison, that it is the legacy of the court, that Madison belongs to them by blood, which she does not possess, and by the magic that lies dormant within her. Madison stepped forward. Ethan wanted to stop her. He wanted to put someone else forward. But Madison looked at him and said, "This is my fight, Cap." Cap. For the first time she called him Cap. Not Reed. Cap. Madison's trust. 12. It became 18. She stepped into the duel. The Ice Queen versus the Ice Knight. Ice versus ice. Magic 112 versus 200. Almost a 2-to-1 difference. Madison struck first. A pillar of ice from both hands. The knight deflected it with a single palm, like a child. She countered. An ice spear 3 meters long. Madison dodged it. Barely. The spear sliced off a lock of her hair. Madison attacked again. Icy spikes shot up from the floor. The knight jumped. She created an icy shield in midair. She landed. She struck. Madison took the blow to her left shoulder. Her arm went numb. She didn't stop. Attack. Counterattack. Attack. 3 minutes. 5. 7. Madison was faster. The knight was stronger. Every exchange of blows cost Madison more HP than it did the knight. HP 900, 720, 580, 430. Ethan couldn't give her a command. Trust 18, below 20. It won't work. He stood and watched, powerless. 3 strength, 0 damage. The knight struck again. An icy blade, a direct blow to Madison's right arm. A sound, a crunch, bone. Madison's arm fell, broken, not by magic, by the blow. The icy blade had sliced through her forearm to the bone, blood on the white ice. Madison screamed, not from pain, from rage. Her left hand rose, her eyes turned white, not like Sophie's, different, ancient. A shard of the god of winter had awakened. The temperature in the courtyard dropped 30 degrees per second. The water in the barrels froze. The grass was covered in frost. Breath turned to steam. Madison struck, not with ice, with winter. A wave of cold that had no form, not a spear, not a spike, a wall of absolute zero. The knight raised both hands. Shield. The wall struck the shield shattered. The wall struck the knight. 3,400 damage. Critical hit. The knight's HP dropped from 5,000 to 1,600 in a single blow. The knight fell to one knee. Her armor was covered in cracks. She looked up at Madison and smiled. She said, "Worthy." She raised her hand. The Winter Court revokes the right to choose. Madison stood in the middle of the courtyard. Her right hand hung limply. Blood dripped onto the stones. She turned to Ethan. She smiled through the pain. She said, "Don't you dare feel sorry for me, Cap." Then her eyes rolled back, and she fell. Ethan rushed to her. He caught her. She was light, cold. Ari was already standing nearby. Her hands were green. The healing had begun. Ari's HP dropped to 80, to 160, to 240. A fracture, a tear, blood loss. She healed and healed. Madison's HP stabilized at 200. The arm had healed, but not properly. The bone had healed crooked. Olivia stood over them. She looked at Madison's arm. Then she said quietly, "I'll make her a prosthesis. Overnight." Ethan looked at her. Olivia wasn't joking. The 6th court had been defeated. The 7th remained, the Court of Bones. The emissary in black armor hadn't moved the entire time. He stood there, watching. His horse didn't stir, like a statue. The emissary removed his helmet. There was no face beneath it. Darkness, emptiness. A voice emerged from the emptiness. He said that the Court of Bones does not choose a duel. The Court of Bones chooses to wait. The right remains with the court, indefinitely. Article 52, Paragraph 3, the right of deferred choice. Ethan didn't know this article. Neither did Sophie. She hadn't seen that page. The library did not contain the complete code. The emissary turned his horse and rode away, without a word, without a farewell. 6 courts lost their right. 1 retained it. The Court of Bones, the Archon, the first coordinator. He was in no hurry. He had waited 1,000 years. He would wait some more. The system flashed. The selection of the courts is complete. 6 out of 7 rights revoked. The group has been preserved, plus 480 trust points from 31 group members. Total trust, 1,312 out of 3,100. A jump, a huge one, but not even half. And the timer has been reset. The first wave of the rift, 47 days, the night after the selection. The forge. Olivia hadn't slept. The clanging of the hammer hadn't stopped since midnight. Ethan sat on the step at the entrance to the basement and listened. A rhythmic thud, a pause. The hiss of red-hot metal in water. The pounding again. It worked like a metronome. No glitches, no fatigue. Ari slept next to Madison in Barracks A. The treatment had cost her 240 HP, more than half. She was the first to fall asleep, for the first time in 3 weeks, because her body had shut down on its own. Madison lay unconscious. Her HP was stable, 200 out of 900. Her arm was in a splint. The bone had healed crookedly. In the morning, Olivia would remove the prosthesis and Ari would have to break the bone again to set it properly. Then reattach the prosthesis. Then heal it again. Another minus 16,000 HP. Ethan counted other people's lives in numbers and hated himself for it, but he couldn't stop. If he stopped counting, someone would die. At dawn, Olivia stepped out of the forge. She had dark circles under her eyes. Her hands were burned. In her left hand, she carried an object. Not a prosthesis, not a mechanical arm. A glove. A long one. from her fingertips to her elbow. Silvery metal from the bus's bodywork. Thin plates connected by leather hinges. Inside, a soft wool lining. The system displayed the specifications. Winter Roy's glove. Quality, masterpiece. Type, prosthetic artifact. Effect, restores 90% of mobility to a damaged limb. Bonus, plus 25 to ice magic when worn. Special effect, the artifact resonates only with Madison Pack. It does not activate on others. Ethan looked at Olivia. He asked why it only resonated with Madison. Olivia blushed. She looked away. She said she didn't know. That's just how it turned out. He understood. Her artifacts were powered by emotions. The stronger the emotion, the more powerful the item. She had been forging all night. For Madison. For the girl who 2 weeks ago had called her a clumsy mechanic. Olivia hated Madison, or so she thought. But she was forging a masterpiece for her. Ethan didn't comment. Ari reset the bone. Madison screamed. Then she fell silent. Ari put it back together correctly. She put on a glove. She healed it. Ari's HP dropped to 80 out of 400. The red zone. Ethan gave her 2 minor recovery elixirs. She drank them. HP 480, above the maximum. The system adjusted it back to 400. Madison opened her eyes. She looked at her hand. A silver glove. She clenched her fist. Her fingers were moving. Slowly, but they were moving. She turned her head. She saw Olivia. Olivia was standing by the wall. Soot on her face. Burns on her hands. Her eyes were red from a sleepless night. Madison said, "Thank you." One word, quietly. Olivia shrugged and went back to sleep. The lottery flashed. 7 words of thanks in a day. A record. A prize. A rare one. A scroll of group bonding. Effect. All group members within a 500-foot radius can hear the coordinator's mental commands. The radius has been increased from 200 to 500 feet. Permanent effect. Ethan activated the scroll. The tactical survey radius expanded. 500 feet. He could see the entire castle. Every single spot. Every stat. Every readiness level. He saw Bree in the stable. Trust 22. Above the 20 threshold. For the first time. He could have given her a command. For the first time. He didn't. Not now. Days passed. Training continued. Madison returned 3 days later. A silver gauntlet on her right hand. The ice struck harder than before. Plus 25 to magic. 112 became 137. She was the 3rd strongest in the group after Gia and Ari. She trained in silence. Hard. Without complaint. Her trust grew. 18, 22, 28, 34. Every day. Every training session. Every group dinner. On the 28th day, she sat next to Ethan at breakfast. Not across from him, next to him. No one said anything. Everyone saw. On the 30th day, Ethan was standing on the castle wall. A month. Exactly a month since the bus crash. 30 days ago, he had been lying on the marble floor that smelled of roses and gunpowder. Now he was standing on the castle wall in a foreign world under 2 moons, and 31 girls called him Cap. Not all of them. 26 out of 30. The other 5 called him Commander, which wasn't bad either. The system displayed a summary. Group Trust, 1,847 out of 3,100, more than half. Growth rate, 38 points per day over the last week. At this rate, 3,100 will be reached in 33 days. The first rift wave in 17 days. He'll make it, barely, if nothing breaks. Ari was standing nearby. She was silent. Then she said she wanted to show him something. She rolled up her sleeve. There were lines on the inside of her forearm. Thin, white, old scars. Not from battle, from a blade. He looked at them. She said they were from a past life, that she doesn't do that here, that she has a reason to live here. She let her sleeve fall back down. She looked at the moons. She said she'd forgotten her cat's name, the one she'd left behind in Portland. She remembers that the cat is Ginger. She remembers that it purrs loudly. But the name is gone. Ethan froze. Memories. Roy's resonance erases memories. Every time they acted in sync, every time the golden shield flashed, someone lost a piece of their past. He didn't know who. He didn't know what. But the process continued. Ari had forgotten the cat's name. What's next? Her mother's name, her father's name, her own name. He looked at her. She was smiling, a small, quiet smile. She said, "Don't make that face, Cap. I remember what's important. I remember you." Ari's trust. 62, the highest in the group. He didn't answer. He stood there, staring at the black horizon. The ash rift was growing. The sky was darkening. The Archon was waiting. And the memories melted away like ice in Madison's palm. Over the course of the night, Olivia had forged the Winter Swarm Glove, a prosthetic artifact for Madison. The artifact resonates only with Madison, which confirms that Olivia's craft works on emotions. The lottery awarded a scroll of group bonding, expanding the radius to 500 feet. Bree's trust score exceeded the 20 threshold for the first time. The group's trust score on the 30th day was 1,847 out of 3,100. Ari admitted she had forgotten her cat's name. Roy's resonance erases memories. The first wave of the rift in 17 days. Day 42. 5 days until the first wave. Roy's camp was located 8 miles from the ash fault. Not a castle. Tents. A field kitchen. Trenches. Ethan set up the camp according to a diagram he remembered from his mother's textbooks. A star-shaped layout. 5 rays. Each ray comprised a group of 5. The center was headquarters, him, Sophie, and the map of the area that Sophie had seen in her dreams. Up close, the ash fault was different. Not a crack in the ground, a wound. Ragged, pulsating. The smell of burnt flesh and ozone wafted from it. The edges of the wound were moving, expanding, 1 centimeter per hour. A black mist rose from the wound. Silhouettes moved within the mist. Creatures. Not the small ones that had crawled through the castle windows. Different ones. Big ones. Many-legged. With bone armor. With eyes that glowed red. Levels 25 to 40. In packs of 10 to 20. They emerged from the rift every 6 hours. The local army set up a barricade. 300 soldiers. They held the line. Barely. Every night someone died. The Queen had sent Roy not to fight. Reconnaissance, assessment, preparation. But Ethan saw the numbers. 300 soldiers. Average level 12. Average strength 35. Against creatures of level 30 and above. The math didn't add up. Without Roy, the line would fall in a week. With Roy, maybe. 5 days before the wave, what Ethan feared most happened. Not an attack, not betrayal, a loss. Not a team member, worse. The village of Crestwood, the very one where he used to sell knives. 300 houses, a market. An old blacksmith with hands like tree roots. A pack from the rift broke through the line at night. 30 creatures, headed north, toward Crestwood. A messenger rode up at dawn. The village was on fire. Ethan got Roy ready in 4 minutes. They ran. 8 miles. 1 hour and 40 minutes. By the time they got there, Crestwood was ashes. Houses were still standing. Some of them. The rest were ruins. Bodies in the streets. Ethan counted. His brain counted automatically. 47 bodies. Out of 300 residents. The rest had fled or were hiding in basements. The creatures were gone. Back to the rift. They'd had their fill. Ari rushed to the wounded. Green light on her hands. She healed them one by one. HP was dropping. 400, 350, 300, 250. Ethan grabbed her by the shoulder. He said, "That's enough." She looked at him. Her eyes were wet. She said no, that there were 10 more wounded. He said her HP was 250 and that if it dropped below 100, she'd lose consciousness. She said she knew, and she kept healing. HP 200, 160, 120. He gave her the last elixir. HP 320. She kept going. 17 wounded villagers. Ari had healed 13. Her HP stopped at 90. The red zone. She was kneeling in the middle of the village. Her hands weren't glowing. Her mana was gone. Her HP was gone. She looked up at Ethan. She said, "I didn't make it in time for the 4 of them." He crouched down beside her. He took her hand. Her fingers were ice cold. She was crying, quietly, without a sound. He didn't tell her she'd done a good job. He didn't say that the 4 were not her fault. He said that tomorrow they would return and fix what could be fixed, and that right now she needed to eat and go to bed. She nodded. Madison stood in the middle of Main Street, a silver glove clenched in her fist. Ice covered the ground around her. She was looking at the bodies. At the child's body by the well, her face was white, not from the cold, from rage that had nowhere to go. She turned to Ethan. She said, "We should have been here." He replied, "Yes." She said, "Next time we will be." He replied, "Yes." It wasn't a promise of comfort. It was a promise of war. They returned to camp. Silence. No one was joking. Sophie wasn't sharing memes. Olivia wasn't grumbling. Bree sat by the campfire and stared into the flames. Her lips were moving. She was talking to the creatures, quietly, in their language. She was asking them to leave. They weren't. These creatures were different. Not forest creatures. Fractured ones. They didn't hear the voice of the abyss, or didn't want to hear it. Ethan sat in the command tent, a map on the table, red dots, breaches, blue dots, barricades, yellow dots, villages. 3 villages within a 20-mile radius of the rift. Crestwood was the first. The next one would be in a week, or in 3 days, or tomorrow. He couldn't protect everyone. 31 girls, 6 fives. They're stronger than the Valeria army, but they're not an army. They're kids. 17-year-olds from Portland, who, a month ago, were on their way to a debate tournament. He stood up, walked out of the tent. Night. 2 moons. The red moon was enormous, twice as big as on the first day. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew it was bad. He walked around the camp. Tactical overview. 30 checkpoints. Everyone was in place. Group trust, 2,340 out of 3,100. Crestwood had spiked. Not joy, grief. Shared grief. They cried together. They were angry together. They grew closer. Trust doesn't grow only from victories. Trust grows from the pain they bear together. He returned to the tent, lay down, closed his eyes, counted. 2,340, 760 to go until 3,100. 5 days until the wave. 152 points a day. Maybe. If the wave doesn't kill any of them, if the Archon doesn't strike, if the memories aren't erased for good. He fell asleep. For the first time in 3 days. He dreamed of a bus, Portland, the bridge over the Columbia River, his mother standing on the riverbank waving. He tried to call out to her, but he couldn't remember her name. He woke up in a sweat. He remembered. Sarah. Her name is Sarah. As long as he remembers. As long as he still remembers. Day 47. The first wave. Ethan stood on a hill half a mile from the ash fault. Behind him were 31 girls, 6 fives, in formation, each in her place. Gia in front, the stone hive shield on her left arm, stone skin from her fingers to her neck. Her eyes were calm. Readiness 78. Madison was on the right. Her silver gauntlet glowed blue. Ice covered both her hands. Magic 137. Eyes white. A shard of the god of winter was awake. Readiness, 72. Ari in the rear. A bag of bandages and potions. Full HP, 400. Her hands glowed green. Readiness, 80. Sophie next to Ethan. Eyes white. The Oracle was working at full capacity. She saw the wave. She counted the creatures. She whispered the numbers to Ethan. 200, 300. More. 400, 500. Bree was on the left flank. Her hood was down. Her hair was tied back. Her lips were moving. She was speaking to the creatures that hadn't yet emerged from the rift. Some were listening. Some didn't. Olivia was in the rear, by the field forge. The last arrowheads, the last blades. The hammer struck until the very last second. The rift pulsed. A black wound in the earth 1/2 mile wide. The edges quivered. A rumble came from the depths, low, like the heartbeat of a dying world. Then the earth split open and they poured out. A wave. Not 10 creatures, not 30, hundreds. Black bodies, bone armor, red eyes. They advanced as a wall, shoulder to shoulder, paw to paw. The infantry of hell. The army of Valeria stood in formation, 300 soldiers. They saw the wave. Some ran. 10, 20. The commander shouted. It was useless. Panic. Ethan saw their stats. Average level 12, readiness 15. They'd break in a minute of combat. He turned to Roy. 31 pairs of eyes were staring at him. He saw their stats. Everything. Readiness, trust, HPMP, cooldowns, everything. And he saw the number he'd been waiting 47 days for. Party trust. 3,040 out of 3,100. 60 points short. 60. He could make them up in a day, 2 days, if there were time. There was no time. The wave was coming. The ground shook beneath their footsteps. He raised his hand, not to give a command, to call for silence. And he said one sentence. We are 31 cards of one player. Silence. Then Gia slammed her shield against the ground. One strike, boom. Then Madison clapped her fist against her palm, the crack of ice. Then Ari, Hannah, Mina, Rachel, Lena, Christy, one after another, sound, rhythm, like a heartbeat. 31 strikes. The ground responded. The system flashed. Plus 60 trust, group trust. 3,100 out of 3,100, maximum. Threshold reached. New notification. Ethan read it, and the world slowed down. Roy's coordinator class. Threshold reached. Class unlocked. Coronator. Roy's first command, issued by a single will, is available. Effect. A single command issued to all group members simultaneously. Duration, 60 seconds. All stats for all party members are doubled. Total shield, 5,000 HP. Cooldown, 24 hours. One-time use. Ethan didn't have time to process it. A wave struck the army's line. The soldiers collapsed within 30 seconds. They ran. The creatures poured through the breach. 200, 300. Ethan activated the first command. He didn't shout. He thought. The group bond scroll. 500 feet. Each of the 31 heard his voice in their heads. Swarm, a single strike, now. A golden flash, not blue, golden. Brighter than the sun. It enveloped all 31 of them. Stats doubled. Gia, strength 224, HP 4,800. Her shield glowed white-hot. Madison, magic 274. The ice turned white instead of blue. Absolute 0. Ari, HP 800. Healing power doubled. Every heal restores health without taking damage for 60 seconds. Hannah, magic 180. White fire. Lena, the arrows flew on their own. Guidance. Every shot hit the target. Every single one. All 31 of them. Doubled. 60 seconds. Shield, 5,000 HP. Gia crashed into the wall of creatures. The shield shattered their bone armor like glass. Each strike dealt 1,200 damage. The creatures were sent flying. They fell. They didn't get back up. Madison struck from the right flank. A wall of winter. Not a beam, not a spear, a wall. Absolute zero within a 50-meter radius. 30 creatures froze instantly. Statues of black ice. Gia walked through them as if through a row of bowling pins. Shards flew everywhere. Hana and the Epsilon 5 were working on the left flank. White fire incinerated the creatures by the dozen. Rachel held her shield for not 6 seconds. 12. Lena shot without missing a single shot. Every arrow meant one corpse. Bree stood at the left edge of the formation. She wasn't fighting. She was speaking. In the voice of the abyss. Loudly. For the first time at full power, her voice traveled through the rift, into the depths, to where the creatures were born. And some of them stopped, froze, turned back. They retreated into the rift. Not all of them, but dozens. Every word Bree spoke robbed the wave of 10 creatures. 60 seconds. They felt like an eternity. And then they were over. The golden glow faded. Stats returned to normal. Exhaustion hit their bodies, like a wall. Everyone's readiness dropped to 10, lower. Gia could barely stand. Madison fell to one knee. Ari clung to Sophie. But the wave was broken. Of the 500 creatures, fewer than 30 remained on their feet. They ran, back toward the rift. The Valerian soldiers stood and watched. Some were on their knees. One was crying. They had seen the golden flash. They had seen 31 girls and 1 boy, unarmed. They had seen how children from another world had broken the wave in a minute. Ethan stood on the hill. 3 power points, 0 damage. He hadn't struck a single blow. He'd given one command, just one, and the wave had been stopped. Not his power, theirs, just his word. The system flashed. The rift's first wave had been stopped. Status, victory. Next wave, 90 days. The swarm's casualties, 0. The Valeria army's casualties, 34 killed before the swarm entered the battle. Ethan memorized the number. 34 soldiers he could have saved if he'd attacked 30 seconds earlier. 30 seconds. 34 lives. He wouldn't forget. They returned to camp. Silence. Exhaustion. Bree walked beside him, without her hood. She said quietly, "Cap, they called me. From the rift. I heard a voice, not the creatures, another, an old one. He knows my name. Archon." Ethan nodded. He knew. He'd been expecting this. Bree continued. "He said one word. Home. Just like back then, in the setting. Home." She looked at Ethan. She said, "I won't go." Her trust was 48, higher than ever. She won't go. Not yet. Camp. Night. Campfire. 31 souls gathered around the fire. A silence that doesn't weigh heavily. A silence that holds. Sophie sat next to Ethan. She was silent for a long time. Then she leaned toward his ear. She whispered a date. March 14th. 5 months from now on the local calendar. He asked what it was. She replied, "My death. I've seen it twice." The same date, the same place. She pleaded, "Find a way, Cap. I believe in you." He didn't answer. Not because he didn't want to, because the answer didn't exist yet. But he would find it. He promised himself. Morning. Dawn. The camp was breaking up. Back to the castle. A messenger from the Queen. A sealed letter. Ethan unfolded it. The message was brief. The people of Valeria had learned of the first wave. Soldiers had told them. Rumors had reached the capital overnight. The people were chanting a name. Not the Queen's. Not the army's. Roy Reed. 2 words. Roy Reed. Ethan rolled up the letter, put it in his pocket. He looked at his group. 31 girls. Gia was carrying a shield on her back. Madison was walking next to Olivia. They were talking, quietly. Madison was showing her glove. Olivia nodded and explained something about the hinge. Ari walked beside Bree. They were silent, but they walked side by side. Sophie walked beside him. She wasn't joking. She wasn't sharing memes. She was thinking about the date, March 14th. Hannah and Mina were walking behind them. Hannah was telling the story of how she'd burned that creature with a single blow. Mina was laughing. Rachel was walking with Lena. Lena was counting the arrows. 14 used up. 6 left. We need more. Olivia heard and said she'd make 40 by evening. Ethan watched them and thought, 3,100 out of 3,100. Maximum trust. The coronator class has been unlocked. The first command has been used. The wave has been stopped. But the Archon is alive. The Court of Bones awaits. The rift hasn't closed. Memories are fading. Ari has forgotten the cat's name. In a month, she'll forget her mother's name. In 2 months, she'll forget Portland. In 3 months, she'll forget who she is. The bodies lie in the Portland hospital, in a coma, alive, waiting. Ethan's mother, Sarah. She's sitting by his bed. He knew it. He didn't see her. He knew, because she always sat by his side when things were bad. He needs to bring them home, all of them, before the last memory fades away. To do that, he must tear the summoning key from its pedestal. To do that, he must pass through the Archon, the first coordinator, the god who 1,000 years ago made a different choice, who stayed behind, who turned his group into fuel, who gnawed through reality and created the rift. Ethan walked along the road toward the castle. 3 strength, 0 damage, class, coronator, 31 cards belonging to a single player. He is not a hero, he is a coordinator. His strength does not lie in his fists. His strength lies in the 31 girls who entrust their lives to him. He looked up. 2 moons hung above the horizon, blue and red. The red one was enormous, almost twice the size of the blue one. It was falling, slowly, but falling, just as the rift was growing, just as memories were fading. The clock was ticking. He quickened his pace. The castle lay ahead. Gray walls, the east wing, Olivia's forge, the kitchen where he kneaded dough every morning, the corridors he walked every night. 30 dots on the tactical overview. Each one is a life. Each one is a promise. He'll bring them home. All of them. Every single one. And along the way, he'll knock God off his throne, because otherwise God will come after them in Portland too. He didn't know how, not yet, but he knew he'd find a way. Because in a debate, there's always an argument, even when it seems there isn't one. You just have to sit across from the one who looks the most confident of all and pick apart his every phrase. Ethan Reed, 17 years old, Portland, 3 forces, Roy's coronator, commander of the first Roy, the boy who can't strike, who will never be able to strike, whose strength is 31 girls, whose rewards are the gratitude of others. He smiled, for the first time in 47 days, not out of joy, out of determination. He was walking home, to the castle that had become his home, to the people who had become his people, to the war that was only just beginning.